I stood in the courthouse hallway staring at the lawsuit papers that trembled in my hands. My own parents were suing me for buying my first home. The reason they claimed I'd stolen my younger sister Grace's future by not giving them the down payment money instead. After working since I was 16, scraping through college on ramen and 3 jobs, never once asking them for help, this was my reward. The bailiff called our case number, and I walked into that courtroom alone. The grocery store smelled like fresh bread and floor cleaner that October afternoon when I filled out my first job application. I was 16, eager to earn my own money, ready to prove I could stand on my own 2 feet. The manager, a kind woman named Dorothy with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, looked over my application and smiled. "Can you work evenings and weekends?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am, every day after school and all weekend if you need me." She hired me on the spot, 20 hours a week during school, 30 during summer. I rushed home that day, bursting with pride, ready to share my news. "Mom, Dad, I got the job at Merchant's Market." My mother barely glanced up from the bills spread across our kitchen table. "Good. You can start paying for your own school supplies and clothes now." My father, still in his paint-splattered work clothes from his struggling construction business, nodded approvingly. "About time you learned the value of hard work, Rosemarie. Everyone pays their own way in this family." I understood. Money was tight. Dad's construction company had been bleeding clients since the economy shifted, and Mom's part-time receptionist position at the dental office barely covered groceries. But I was ready to contribute, ready to ease their burden. My younger sister Grace wandered in 10 years old and clutching her advanced mathematics workbook. Even then, she moved differently than I did, with a confidence that came from knowing she was special, gifted, destined for greatness, according to our parents. "Rosie got a job," Mom announced, finally looking up. "Maybe when you're older, Grace, but only if it doesn't interfere with your studies. You're going places, sweetheart." I started work the next Monday. Every day after school, I'd rush from my last class to catch the bus that would take me to Merchant's Market. 4-hour shifts turned into 6 when Dorothy realized how reliable I was. My grades stayed steady, mostly B's with a few A's in English and history. I developed a system homework during break, studying after my shifts ended at 10, catching 5 hours of sleep before starting again. The months blurred together in a rhythm of schoolwork, sleep, repeat. My earnings went towards school lunches, replacement shoes when mine wore through the graphing calculator required for junior year math. I watched other kids complain about their allowances while I counted every dollar, planned every purchase. One evening in May, just weeks before my high school graduation, I arrived home to find my parents huddled at the kitchen table with papers spread before them. Legal documents, bank statements, loan applications. "What's going on?" I set down my backpack, still wearing my Merchant's Market uniform. Dad looked up, his face drawn with exhaustion. "We're refinancing the house." "Is everything okay?" Mom reached over to squeeze Grace's hand. My sister sat beside her, working through calculus problems despite being only in 7th grade. "Everything's fine, Rosemarie. We're just planning ahead for Grace's education. The private academy accepted her for next year. Riverside Preparatory." I knew the school, $30,000 a year uniforms that cost more than my entire wardrobe, students who went on to Ivy League universities. "She deserves the best education possible," Dad said firmly. "Some sacrifices are worth making." I nodded, understanding. Grace was exceptional. Her test scores put her in the 99th percentile nationally. Teachers called her a prodigy. Of course, they'd invest in her future. "What about college?" I asked carefully. "For me, I mean. I've been looking at state schools and with financial aid." "You're smart, Rosemarie. You'll figure it out." Mom's tone carried a finality that stopped further questions. "There are loan scholarships. You've always been independent." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in my room calculating numbers. Tuition room and board textbooks fees. The figures swam before my eyes. I'd saved $3,000 over 2 years of work, but it would barely cover one semester's books and supplies. 2 weeks later, at my graduation ceremony, I sat in my cap and gown watching other parents cry with pride as their children walked across the stage. My parents sat politely. Mom checking her phone, Dad's mind clearly elsewhere. Grace had a violin recital that evening they didn't want to be late for. When my name was called, I walked across that stage alone in every way that mattered. Dorothy from Merchants Market cheered louder than my own family. As I accepted my diploma, a terrible understanding settled into my bones. I'd been working since 16, but I'd really been on my own much longer than that. That night, while my classmates celebrated at graduation parties, I picked up an extra shift at the store. Dorothy asked why I wasn't out celebrating. "This is my celebration," I told her, organizing the cereal aisle. "Every hour I work is another step toward my future." She studied me for a long moment, then disappeared into her office. When she returned, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a $500 check and a note. "For the girl who never asks for anything but deserves everything. College will be lucky to have you." I cried in the break room, clutching that check. It was the first time anyone had invested in my future, had seen me as worthy of support. Dorothy's faith meant more than she'd ever know, but even more importantly, it revealed something I'd been too afraid to admit. My parents had money for education. They'd found $30,000 a year for Grace's private school had qualified for refinancing our home based on their assets. There had always been money, just not for me. Community college wasn't my dream, but dreams cost money I didn't have. Riverside Community College sat 40 minutes from home by bus, a sprawling campus of concrete buildings and overworked professors who genuinely cared about their students' success. I enrolled in 15 credits and immediately started looking for night work to cover expenses. The Moonlight Diner hired me within a week, midnight to 6 in the morning, Friday through Tuesday serving truckers and shift workers who tipped well if you kept their coffee cups full. The manager, Carlos, took one look at my class schedule and shook his head. "You sure about this full-time school and graveyard shifts don't mix well?" "I'm sure." I needed the money more than I needed sleep. My home became a converted garage behind an elderly couple's house. No proper heating, just a space heater that clicked and hummed through winter nights. One window, a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a bathroom so small I could touch both walls at once. $400 a month, utilities included. The elderly landlords, the Johnsons, felt sorry for me and often left leftovers on my doorstep. 3 months into my first semester, my parents made their first and only visit. I'd cleaned obsessively, trying to make the space presentable, even buying a small plant to brighten the corner near my desk. Mom stepped inside and immediately wrinkled her nose. "It smells like motor oil in here." "It used to be a garage," I explained unnecessarily. Dad examined the space heater with professional disapproval. "This thing's a fire hazard. You should find somewhere safer." "This is what I can afford." They stayed exactly 12 minutes. Mom spent most of it talking about Grace's stellar performance at Riverside Prep, how she'd already caught the attention of admissions counselors from prestigious universities. Dad mentioned business was picking up. They'd just landed a contract for a new shopping center. "That's wonderful," I said, serving instant coffee in mismatched mugs I'd bought at a thrift store. "Maybe things will be easier now." Mom set down her mug without drinking. "Actually, that's partly why we're here. Grace's violin teacher says she needs a better instrument. Professional quality. We're looking at one that costs $8,000. $8,000 for a violin. It's an investment in her future," Dad said. "Which brings us to our question. You're working full-time, right, living simply. We were wondering if you could help out. Maybe $500 a month, just until we get the shopping center payment." The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. "I make $6.50 an hour plus tips. After rent and bus passes, I have maybe $200 left for food and school supplies." "Every little bit helps," Mom pressed. "Family supports family." "Then why—" I stopped myself, swallowing the words that wanted to explode out. "Why didn't you support me? Why is it only family when you need something?" They left soon after Mom mentioning they'd be late for Grace's recital if they didn't hurry. I watched them drive away in Dad's newer truck, the one he'd bought just months after refinancing the house for Grace's education. That semester, I discovered the true meaning of hunger. Not the skip lunch because you're busy kind, but the deep gnawing emptiness that comes from rationing one box of crackers and a jar of peanut butter across a week. The campus had a food pantry, but shame kept me away. I was working full-time. I should be able to feed myself. Marcus Chen found me one Tuesday afternoon slumped over my chemistry textbook in the library, trying to ignore the way the formulas swam before my eyes. "Hey, you're in my calc class, right, Rosemarie?" I straightened, blinking away the dizzy spell. "Yeah, hi." He sat down without invitation, pulling out a container of leftover Chinese food. "My mom always packs too much. Want to help me out? I hate wasting food." The smell of sesame chicken nearly made me cry. Pride warred with hunger for exactly 3 seconds before I accepted. We ate in companionable silence while studying, and somehow it became our routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Marcus would appear with extras from home. Later, I learned he'd noticed me rationing a single granola bar across an entire study session and started bringing food specifically for me. He never made me feel like a charity case, never asked why I was so thin or why my hands sometimes shook during morning classes. He just showed up consistent and kind, my first real friend in years. Winter arrived with a vengeance that year. The space heater in my converted garage struggled against the cold, and I took to wearing every piece of clothing I owned to bed. My fingers turned clumsy from the cold, making note-taking difficult. I started spending more time on campus, finding warm corners in the library, stretching single cups of coffee across entire study sessions. One particularly brutal February night, the space heater died completely. I woke to see my breath clouding in the air, ice forming on the inside of my window. The Johnsons were visiting their daughter in Florida. I had no one to call, nowhere to go. I made it to campus on the first bus, huddling in the 24-hour study room until my morning shift at the diner. Carlos took one look at my blue lips and made me sit by the kitchen's heat lamps. "You okay, college girl?" "Heater broke. I'll figure something out." He studied me for a long moment, then disappeared into his office. When he returned, he handed me $300 cash. "No," I said immediately. "I can't." "It's an advance on your wages. You'll work it off. Can't have my best waitress freezing to death." I bought a new space heater that day and spent the rest on a thick sleeping bag designed for camping. The garage remained cold but survivable. I worked extra shifts to pay Carlos back within 2 weeks, but I never forgot his kindness. Spring semester brought new challenges. Grace visited one Saturday, driven by our parents who waited in the car. At 14, she'd grown tall and elegant, wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "They said I could only stay 20 minutes, she announced, looking around my small space with poorly concealed shock. "Is this really where you live?" "It's not so bad, just temporary while I finish my associate's degree." She perched on the edge of my salvaged desk chair. "Mom says you're being stubborn, that you could live at home if you helped out more with family expenses." "Is that what she says?" "She says you've always been too proud, too independent for your own good, that you'd rather struggle than accept help." I wanted to laugh, or cry, maybe both. "Grace, has she ever told you how much they offered to help with my college?" She frowned. "They said they paid for your first semester before you insisted on doing it yourself." The lie sat between us, ugly and revealing. I could have corrected it, could have shown her my financial aid documents proving I'd never received a cent. But what would be the point? She was 14, thriving in her expensive school, beloved and supported. Why taint that with truth? "Everyone has their own path," I said instead. She left exactly at the 20-minute mark, pausing at the door. "I'm sorry you're too proud to come home, Rosie. We miss you at family dinners." After she left, I sat on my narrow bed and let myself feel the full weight of my family's narrative. In their version, I was the difficult daughter who chose poverty over accepting their generous help. They'd never mentioned there was no help to accept, no generosity extended. It was easier to paint me as proud than admit they'd simply decided I wasn't worth investing in. That night at the diner, a regular named Margaret noticed my red eyes. "Boy trouble?" she asked gently. "Family trouble." She patted my hand with fingers worn soft by age. "Sometimes the family we choose is kinder than the one we're born into. You remember that. I served coffee and pie to truckers and night shift workers, thinking about Margaret's words. Marcus with his quiet kindness, Dorothy who'd believed in me, Carlos who'd kept me from freezing Margaret with her gentle wisdom. Maybe I was building a different kind of family, one measured not in blood but in small acts of care. The semester ended with me earning a perfect 4.0 GPA despite everything. My academic advisor, Professor Williams, called me into her office. "These grades with your work ethic, you could transfer to State University with a full academic scholarship. I'd be happy to write you a recommendation." Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time in months. State University, a real degree, a future beyond waiting tables and converted garages. That evening, I called home to share the news. Mom answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. "State University. That's 2 hours away. How would you help with Grace's expenses if you're living so far?" I wouldn't be able to help. I'd need every penny for my own education. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. "Well," she finally said, "I suppose you'll do what you want. You always have. Grace's teacher thinks she might qualify for early admission to Columbia. We'll need to start saving for application fees and college visits. Every sacrifice matters when it comes to securing her future." She hung up without asking about my scholarship, my grades, or my dreams. I set the phone down gently and opened my laptop to start the transfer application. If I was going to be alone in this journey, I might as well reach for something bigger than anyone believed I deserved. State University's campus spread before me like a small city, red brick buildings, connected by tree-lined pathways, where students hurried between classes with purpose and promise. My academic scholarship covered tuition and basic fees, but everything else fell on my shoulders. I arrived with 2 suitcases and a determination to make this opportunity count. The financial aid office became my second home those first weeks. I applied for every grant, every work-study position, every scholarship with requirements I could possibly meet. The woman behind the desk, Patricia, eventually knew me by name. "Back again, Rosemarie. What are we hunting for today?" Textbook assistance programs. My chemistry book alone costs $300. She pulled up several applications on her computer. "You know there's also a tutoring position open in the math department. 20 hours a week pays $12 an hour." I filled out the application on the spot. Within a week, I was juggling 3 jobs tutoring struggling freshmen in algebra, washing dishes in the campus dining hall, and weekend shifts at a coffee shop downtown. My schedule ran from 5 in the morning until midnight most days, with classes squeezed between work shifts like precious gems I couldn't afford to lose. The exhaustion crept up slowly at first. Dozing off during lectures, mixing up orders at the coffee shop, explaining the same equation 3 times before realizing I was saying it wrong. I lived on dining hall leftovers and instant noodles, saving every penny for rent on the small studio apartment I shared with 2 other girls. We'd strung curtains between our beds for privacy rotating shower schedules down to the minute. By November of junior year, my body started sending warnings I couldn't ignore. Dizzy spells during tutoring sessions, hands shaking too badly to write equations on the whiteboard, waking up on the bathroom floor with no memory of how I'd gotten there. "You need to see a doctor," my roommate Aisha insisted after finding me collapsed over my textbooks for the 3rd time that week. "Can't afford to miss work." "You can't afford not to. What happens to your scholarships if your grades slip?" She was right, but I pushed through another week, then another. Finals loomed, and I'd promised to cover extra shifts for coworkers traveling home for Thanksgiving. The coffee shop stayed busy with students cramming for exams, and I worked doubles, triples, whatever they'd give me. The breaking point came on a Wednesday morning. I stood behind the espresso machine watching steam rise in beautiful spirals when the world tilted sideways. The last thing I remembered was the crash of breaking ceramic and someone screaming my name. I woke in a hospital bed hooked to an IV drip, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. A doctor who looked barely older than me stood writing notes on a chart. "Welcome back. You've been out for about 6 hours. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, malnutrition. When's the last time you ate a real meal?" I tried to remember. Monday, Sunday. The days blurred together into an endless cycle of work and study. I need to get back to work. My shift. Your shift is covered. Your manager, Carlos, called to check on you. Apparently you listed him as your emergency contact. Carlos from the old diner. I'd never updated my information when I'd moved away. Somehow, 2 years later, he was still the person I trusted most in a crisis. Your parents are on their way, the doctor continued. We called your other emergency contact when Carlos's number was disconnected. Dread pooled in my stomach. You called my parents. They should be here within the hour. I spent that hour trying to figure out how to explain this situation without sounding pathetic, how to frame working myself into hospitalization as something other than desperation. When they arrived, I needn't have worried about explanations. They had their own agenda. Mom rushed in, first designer purse clutched to her chest, looking around the hospital room with barely concealed disgust. Dad followed, checking his phone, probably calculating lost income from leaving work early. 3 days in the hospital, Mom announced without preamble. Do you have any idea what this will cost? I have insurance through the university, which we'll probably have to supplement. This is exactly what happens when you insist on doing everything alone. So stubborn, so proud. Dad finally looked up from his phone. We drove 2 hours for this, Rosemary. We have Grace's college prep consultant meeting this afternoon. I didn't ask you to come. The hospital called you. They exchanged one of their meaningful looks, the kind that always preceded what they considered tough love. Actually, Dad said, pulling papers from his jacket, this might be perfect timing. We need to discuss Grace's future. My IV drip seemed to beep louder in the sudden silence. What does Grace's future have to do with me being hospitalized? Mom smoothed the papers on my hospital tray table. She's been accepted to a pre-college program at Columbia, summer intensive. It's a huge opportunity, basically guarantees admission if she performs well. That's wonderful for her. It's $15,000, plus travel housing expenses, close to $20,000 total. I stared at the papers, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. You want me to co-sign loans? Just as backup. We'll make the payments, of course. But the bank wants additional security. I'm 20 years old, working 3 minimum wage jobs, lying in a hospital bed because I collapsed from exhaustion. What bank would consider me additional security? Dad leaned forward. You have excellent credit from paying your own bills. That's all they need to see. Come on, Rosemary. Family helps family. The rage that flooded through me felt volcanic, powerful enough to burn away 2 decades of careful silence. When has family helped family? When I needed textbooks? When I was eating peanut butter for dinner? When I was sleeping in a garage with no heat? You never asked, Mom started. I shouldn't have had to ask you refinanced our home for Grace's high school. You buy her $8,000 violins and designer clothes while I'm mixing expired creamer into water and calling it dinner. And now you want me to risk my credit, my future for another opportunity you're handing her while I'm literally hospitalized from trying to survive alone. The monitor beside my bed beeped frantically, matching my elevated heart rate. A nurse poked her head in, assessed the situation, and entered fully. I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you're upsetting the patient. Mom gathered the papers with shaking hands. We're trying to help Grace have the future she deserves. I'm sorry you're too selfish to see that. They left without saying goodbye, without asking if I needed anything, without even pretending to care that their eldest daughter was hooked to machines because she'd worked herself nearly to death. The nurse checked my vitals, patted my hand gently. Family troubles. Something like that. She adjusted my blanket with practiced kindness. I've been doing this 20 years, seen all kinds of families. Blood doesn't always mean love, honey. You remember that. After she left, I lay in the quiet room thinking about paths and choices. My parents had made theirs long ago, deciding which daughter deserved investment, which one would figure it out on her own. But lying there, exhausted and alone, but somehow not lonely, I made my own decision. Marcus arrived an hour later with a backpack full of notes from classes I'd missed and a container of his mother's soup. "Heard you decided to take a dramatic study break," he said, settling into the visitor's chair like he planned to stay a while. "Apparently passing out is trending this semester." He didn't laugh. "I've been watching you kill yourself for 3 years, Rosie. We all have. When are you going to realize you don't have to do this alone?" "I don't have a choice." "That's where you're wrong." He pulled out his laptop. "My mom's friend runs a nonprofit. They offer emergency grants to students facing financial hardship. I took the liberty of starting your application." "Marcus, I can't." "Yes, you can. You can accept help that comes without strings, without conditions, without someone trying to guilt you into sacrificing your future for theirs." We spent the afternoon filling out applications, him reading questions aloud while I answered from my hospital bed. Emergency grants, food assistance programs, textbook lending libraries, resources I'd been too proud or too exhausted to seek out myself. "Why are you doing this?" I asked as he submitted the 5th application. "Because that's what friends do. They show up. They help. They don't keep score or demand repayment or make you feel small for needing support." The tears came then, 3 years of suppressed emotion flooding out, while Marcus sat quietly, occasionally handing me tissues. He didn't tell me to stop crying or that everything would be okay. He just stayed steady and present until the storm passed. 2 days later, I was released with strict orders to rest and reduce my work schedule. The emergency grant came through within a week, enough to cover 3 months of expenses while I recovered. My professors worked with me to make up missed assignments. The math department reduced my tutoring hours but increased my hourly rate. I thought the worst was behind me. I'd stood up to my parents, found real support, learned to accept help from people who actually cared. But I'd underestimated how far my family would go to get what they wanted. The call came on a Thursday evening. Grace, now 16, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "Rosie, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what they were planning." Grace slowed down. "What's wrong?" "The forms you wouldn't sign, they found another way. They used your social security number. Mom said it was okay because you're family, that you'd understand eventually." The world stopped. "They did what?" "The loan for my Columbia program. They forged your signature. Said you'd thank them later when I got into an Ivy League school. But I heard them talking to someone about using the money differently. Something about Dad's business debts. Rosie, what do I do?" I sank onto my bed phone, trembling in my hand. Identity theft. Fraud. My own parents had committed crimes against me rather than accept my refusal to sacrifice my future for their plans. "Grace, listen carefully. Do you have any proof texts, emails, anything in writing?" I took pictures of the documents, and I recorded them talking about it. I was scared. You're the only one who's ever told me the truth. My little sister, the golden child, had seen through the facade and chosen truth over comfort. Maybe there was hope for our relationship after all. "Send me everything in Grace. This isn't your fault, none of it. You're just as much a victim of their manipulation as I am." After we hung up, I sat in my small apartment thinking about breaking points. I'd thought mine was a hospital bed, but I was wrong. The breaking point isn't when your body gives out or your spirit cracks. It's the moment you realize the people who should protect you are the ones causing the deepest wounds. I called Marcus first, then found a lawyer through the university's legal aid program. My parents had finally pushed too far. They'd moved from emotional manipulation to actual crimes, and this time I wouldn't stay silent. The war for my independence was about to begin in earnest, and for the first time I wasn't fighting alone. Graduation day arrived, wrapped in sunshine and the promise of new beginnings. I stood in my cap and gown, magna cum laude cords draped around my neck, watching other families cluster together for photos. Marcus's mother insisted on taking pictures of us together, treating me like a second child she'd somehow acquired during college. "So proud of both of you," she said in accented English, tears streaming down her face. "My 2 brilliant students." I'd sent my parents an invitation out of obligation, knowing they wouldn't come. Grace had texted that morning, They're taking me to look at Yale today. I'm sorry. You deserve better. The marketing position at Brennan Industries wasn't glamorous, but it paid $42,000 a year with benefits, real health insurance, paid vacation days, a desk with my nameplate, Rosemarie Winters Marketing Coordinator. I'd never owned anything with my name engraved on it before. My new apartment was small, but mine alone. One bedroom, actual heating that worked windows that sealed properly against the rain. I spent my first paycheck on a real bed, not a futon or air mattress, but an actual mattress and box spring. That first night, lying on something designed for sleep rather than mere survival, I cried from sheer relief. The fraud case against my parents moved slowly through legal channels. They'd been careful, but not careful enough. Grace's recordings proved intent, and the forged documents spoke for themselves. My lawyer, Jennifer Walsh, worked pro bono through the legal aid program. They're looking at serious charges, she explained during one of our meetings. Identity theft, fraud, forgery. The prosecutor is interested. I don't want them in jail. I just want them to stop. Jennifer studied me over her glasses. You're kinder than they deserve. Work became my refuge. Brennan Industries manufactured eco-friendly packaging, not exactly thrilling, but the marketing team was small and eager. My manager David believed in throwing new employees into the deep end. We need fresh eyes on the Morrison campaign, he announced my second week. Rosemarie, what would you do to make recycled cardboard sexy? I spent nights researching, mornings drafting proposals, afternoons refining presentations. The solution came to me during a coffee break stop, selling Cardboard Start, selling the story of transformation, waste becoming worth, garbage becoming guardian of new products, second chances creating first impressions. The campaign launched 3 months later. Orders increased by 40% in the first quarter. David called me into his office, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Whatever we're paying you isn't enough. You just saved Morrison as a client. The raise was modest but meaningful. I moved to a better apartment, started a real emergency fund, even bought professional clothes that weren't from thrift stores. Success tasted like stability, like knowing I could pay bills without calculating whether I could afford both electricity and food. Grace reached out more frequently as senior year approached. Our parents had shifted their strategy after the legal threats, painting themselves as victims of a vindictive daughter who couldn't appreciate sacrifice. Extended family chose sides. Aunts who'd never called suddenly had opinions about my selfishness. Uncles posted passive-aggressive Facebook statuses about children who forget where they came from. They're telling everyone you're trying to destroy the family, Grace reported during one call, that you're jealous of my opportunities. What do you tell them? Nothing. I've learned keeping quiet keeps me safer, but I'm documenting everything like you taught me. She'd grown wise too young, my baby sister. The golden child discovering her pedestal was actually a cage. My promotion to marketing director came with a $60,000 salary and a small team to manage. 28 years old, leading campaigns for major clients, finally earning enough to stop checking my bank balance before every purchase. I celebrated by taking Marcus and his girlfriend to dinner at a restaurant with cloth napkins. Remember when we shared leftover Chinese in the library? Marcus raised his glass. Look at us now. We survived, I toasted back. Despite everything, we survived. The success felt hollow sometimes. I'd catch myself wanting to call home to share wins with people who'd never celebrated them. Then I'd remember the hospital, the forged signatures, the decades of being told I wasn't worth investing in. Sarah Chen joined Brennan Industries as our new VP of Marketing. Brilliant, accomplished, and refreshingly direct, she took me under her wing immediately. David tells me you're the reason we kept Morrison, she said during our first meeting. Tell me about your approach. We talked for 2 hours about strategy, creativity, and the psychology of transformation. She saw something in me I was still learning to see in myself, potential beyond survival worth, beyond work ethic. I'm starting an MBA mentorship program, she announced weeks later, identifying high-potential employees and supporting their advanced education. Interested. I can't afford. The company covers 70%, loans for the rest. And before you spiral into anxiety about debt, remember that investing in yourself isn't the same as someone else stealing your future. This is your choice, your benefit, your advancement. I applied that night essays pouring out like water breaking through a dam. Why I wanted an MBA, what I'd contribute, how I'd use the education. For the first time, I was writing about my future without apologizing for wanting one. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. I sat in my apartment staring at it, waiting for someone to tell me there'd been a mistake. When no one did, I called the only person who'd celebrated my victories without reservation. Marcus, I got in, full admission to the evening MBA program. His whoop of joy was loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. We're going out, right now. This deserves champagne. That weekend, my parents made their move. They showed up at my workplace making a scene in the lobby about their ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned family for career. Security had to escort them out, but not before several clients witnessed the spectacle. David called me into his office the next morning. My stomach churned, certain I was about to lose everything I'd built. Are you okay? He pushed a box of tissues across his desk. Security gave me the full report. Those were your parents. I'm so sorry. I'll understand if... Rosemary, stop. I'm not firing you. I'm worried about you. Do you need time off legal resources? The company has employee assistance programs. I stared at him, uncomprehending. You're not angry. I'm furious. At them. No parent should ambush their child at work. That's harassment, and we take employee safety seriously. HR is already drafting a no trespass order. The tears came then, relief and gratitude, and a decade of suppressed grief pouring out while my boss sat quietly, occasionally murmuring that everything would be okay. Later, Sarah stopped by my office with coffee and unexpected wisdom. Family dysfunction doesn't define you, she said simply. How you rise despite it does. And you, my dear, are rising beautifully. Word spread through the office about what had happened. Instead of judgment, I found support. Colleagues shared their own stories of difficult families, of choosing career over dysfunction, of building lives on their own terms. My marketing team rallied around me, protective and fierce. Anyone who messes with our director messes with all of us, my assistant declared, setting a plan on my desk. This is for good energy, and I've already warned reception about any unexpected visitors. Grace called that night, voice thick with tears. They're losing it, Rosie. The legal bills, the business failing. They're talking about suing you for defamation, now saying you've ruined their reputation. Let them try. Truth isn't defamation. I'm scared. What if they come after me next? I'm almost 18. They're already talking about taking loans for my college. Then we make sure you have options they don't control. Start applying for scholarships now. Get a job, even part-time. Build your own credit. Document everything. And grace. The moment you turn 18, I'll help you open your own bank accounts. They can't steal what they can't access. We spent an hour strategizing her independence. The little sister I'd protected from afar, finally ready to protect herself. She'd learned from my mistakes would make her escape with more wisdom than I'd had. My first MBA class was financial management. I sat in the lecture hall surrounded by other working professionals and felt like I belonged. No longer the girl in thrift store clothes, hoping no one noticed. Now I was Rosemary Winters, marketing director, MBA candidate survivor, writing her own success story. The professor discussed investment strategies, and I thought about investments beyond money. Sarah investing mentorship in me. Marcus investing friendship when I had nothing to offer in return. Jennifer investing legal expertise in justice. Even Grace investing trust in the sister who'd been painted as the family villain. Some investments compound over time, growing stronger with each passing year. Others, like my parents' conditional love, were debts disguised as gifts, demanding repayment with interest that would bankrupt your soul. I chose my investments more carefully now. Time, energy, trust, and love went to people who saw my worth beyond my utility. The returns were already paying dividends in ways my parents' calculator hearts could never compute. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Proud of you, MBA student. Coffee tomorrow to celebrate. I smiled, typing back, only if you let me pay. I can afford the good stuff now. Success hadn't come overnight or easily, but sitting in that classroom building a future no one could steal, I understood something fundamental. The best revenge against those who said you'd amount to nothing is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be. And I was just getting started. The MBA program transformed my evenings from Netflix and exhaustion into case studies and financial models. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd leave Brennan Industries at 5 sharp, grab a protein bar from my desk drawer, and drive to campus where my second life as a student waited. The other students came from various industries, all hungry for advancement, all sacrificing sleep for the promise of better futures. My study group formed naturally around shared exhaustion and complementary skills. Janet from healthcare administration, Robert from tech startups, Linda from nonprofit management, and me from corporate marketing. We met Saturday mornings at a coffee shop that knew our orders by heart. Question 12 is killing me. Robert groaned, pushing his laptop away. How do you calculate the weighted average cost of capital when half the variables seem made up? Think of it like marketing metrics. I suggested, pulling up my notes. You're measuring potential return against investment risk. Same concept, different language. Teaching others helped cement my own understanding. Years of explaining algebra to struggling freshmen had prepared me for translating complex concepts into digestible pieces. My professors noticed often, calling on me to bridge theory and practice. Sarah became more than a mentor. She evolved into a sponsor, actively creating opportunities for my growth. When Brennan Industries landed a contract with Morrison's competitor, she assigned me as lead strategist. This is a $10 million account, she said, sliding the briefing across her desk. Think you can handle it? Absolutely. Good, don't prove me wrong. The Hartley Corporation manufactured sustainable building materials, competing directly with our Morrison packaging success. They wanted market differentiation, something beyond green credentials that every company claimed. I assembled my team, scheduled brainstorming sessions, and dove deep into construction industry trends. The solution emerged during my financial management class. The professor discussed value chains, and suddenly I saw it. Hartley shouldn't sell products, they should sell partnerships. Contractors didn't want just materials. They wanted reliability support and shared success. Our campaign positioned Hartley as your building partner, emphasizing their 24-hour support line, on-site consultation services, and shared risk programs. When we presented to their board, the CEO stood up and applauded. This is exactly what we've been trying to articulate. You understand our business better than we do. The account tripled our projected revenue. David retired early, recommending me as his replacement. At 29, I became the youngest marketing director in Brennan Industries history, managing a team of 12 and a budget that would have seemed fictional to my younger self. My parents predictably tried to take credit. Someone showed me their Facebook post, so proud of our daughter Rosemarie following in her father's entrepreneurial footsteps. We always knew she'd succeed in business, just like we planned. I didn't respond, didn't correct the narrative or point out the irony. Success was its own response, louder than any Facebook argument could be. Grace called more frequently as her high school graduation approached. Our parents' financial situation had deteriorated further. Dad's construction business filed for bankruptcy, Mom's receptionist job barely covering their refinanced mortgage payments. The Golden Child's college fund had evaporated into business debts and failed investments. They're pressuring me to take out massive loans for Columbia, she confided one evening, saying it's my turn to invest in my own future like you did. Except I chose my path, they're choosing yours. I got into State University, too. Full academic scholarship, just like you. That's amazing, Grace. You must be so proud. Her silence stretched long enough that I knew what came next. They won't let me accept it. Columbia or nothing, they say. The prestige matters more than the debt. You're 18 now. They can't stop you. Can't they? Her voice broke. They'll disown me like they did you. I'll lose everything. You'll lose their conditional approval. That's not the same as everything. We talked for hours about independence fear and the price of living authentically. By the call's end, she'd decided to defer both admissions, take a gap year to work, and save money while making her own choice without their pressure. They'll be furious, she said. They're always furious about something. Might as well make it worthwhile. My MBA graduation coincided with a major shift at Brennan Industries. Sarah was promoted to Chief Marketing Officer, and she wanted me as her VP of Marketing. The salary jump would put me over 6 figures, a number that felt surreal for someone who'd once rationed crackers. You've earned this, Sarah said when I hesitated. Stop thinking like someone who has to be grateful for scraps. You're valuable. Act like it. The new role meant managing directors across multiple divisions, presenting to the board quarterly, and representing the company at industry conferences. I bought real suits, not department store approximations, but tailored pieces that made me look like I belonged in boardrooms. My team threw a celebration dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. Halfway through appetizers, I noticed a familiar figure at the bar, Dad nursing a whiskey looking older and smaller than my memories. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, I thought he might approach, might finally say the words I'd stopped hoping to hear. Instead, he finished his drink and left without acknowledgement. "You okay?" Sarah asked, following my gaze. "Just seeing ghosts." "The best revenge is a life well lived," she said, raising her wine glass. "And baby, you're living splendidly." The first board presentation terrified me more than any childhood punishment. 12 executives around a mahogany table expecting insights worth their time and the company's money. I'd rehearsed until the words felt branded on my tongue, but standing there, I suddenly felt like the 16-year-old girl in a grocery store uniform pretending she belonged. Then I remembered Dorothy's faith, Carlos's kindness, Marcus's friendship, Sarah's sponsorship. I wasn't alone in that room. I carried every person who'd believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. The presentation flowed smoothly. Revenue projections, market analysis, strategic initiatives for the next fiscal year. When I finished, the CEO nodded approvingly. "Solid work, Rosemarie. The board approves your proposed budget increase. Keep delivering results like Hartley, and we'll keep investing in your vision." Investing. The word that had haunted my childhood now applied to me. I was worth investing in had always been, just had to find the right investors. Grace took her gap year job at a local bookstore, saving every penny while secretly applying to scholarships. She visited my apartment on weekends, marveling at my home office and professional wardrobe. "You really made it out," she said one Saturday, trying on my blazers. "Completely on your own." "Not completely alone. I had help, just not from where we expected it." "They still tell people you're ungrateful. That success went to your head." "What do you tell people?" She straightened the blazer's lapels, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "I tell them my sister is the strongest person I know, that she saved herself when no one else would then reach back to save me too." My eyes burned with sudden tears. All those years of being painted as the selfish daughter, and Grace had seen through it, had watched and learned and chosen truth over comfortable lies. "When you're ready to leave," I promised, "I'll be here. Extra bedroom, help with applications, whatever you need. Even if they sue you again, they're talking about it, claiming you turned me against them." "Let them. I've got a legal team now, and truth is still the best defense." She hugged me then, fierce and grateful. "I love you, Rosie, for showing me another way was possible." That night, I sat in my home office reviewing quarterly reports, Grace studying for her online courses in the living room. My phone buzzed with messages from my team, planning Monday's strategy session. Sarah had sent an article about women in leadership, noting, "This reminded me of you, trailblazer." The girl who'd stocked grocery shelves at 16 would never have imagined this life. 6-figure salary, respected leadership position, a sister learning to break free and chosen family who celebrated every success. My parents had been right about one thing: I'd figured it out, just not the way they'd expected. Success hadn't eliminated the scars. I still checked my bank balance, obsessively still felt my heart race when unexpected expenses arose. But I'd learned the difference between surviving and thriving, between existing in spite of my past and succeeding because of the strength it had forged. My computer pinged with an email from the CEO. Rosemarie wanted to give you advance notice. We're restructuring next quarter. Big changes coming, and I want you positioned for maximum opportunity. Let's discuss over coffee Monday. Changes meant chances for those prepared to seize them, and I'd been preparing my whole life for opportunities no one thought I deserved. The climb wasn't over. If anything, the real ascent was just beginning. But this time I wasn't climbing alone. I had mentors above, reaching down, peers beside me pushing forward, and a sister below that I could finally help pull up. My parents had taught me to expect nothing from family. Instead, I'd learned to build everything with chosen family, and that foundation, unlike their conditional love, would never crumble under the weight of my success. 2 years of aggressive saving transformed my bank statements from survival documents into possibility blueprints. Every bonus, every raise, every tax refund went straight into what I'd labeled my freedom fund. The number grew slowly at first, then faster as my VP salary kicked in. 20,000, 30, 45. House hunting started as a fantasy, scrolling through listings during lunch breaks, imagining myself in spaces that belonged to me alone. No more landlords, no more rent increases, no more temporary. Sarah caught me browsing one afternoon and pulled up a chair. Finally ready to join the homeowners club. Just looking, the market's insane right now. The market's always insane, but you know what's more insane? Paying someone else's mortgage when you could be building equity. She connected me with her realtor, a sharp woman named Diana, who specialized in first-time buyers. Our initial meeting felt like therapy crossed with financial planning. "Tell me about your must-haves versus nice-to-haves," Diana said, pen poised over her tablet. "Safe neighborhood, within 30 minutes of work, space for a home office, and..." I hesitated, feeling foolish. "A garden. I've always wanted to grow my own vegetables." "That's not silly at all. Gardens are about putting down roots literally and figuratively. Let's find you some good soil to plant in." We spent weekends touring properties, each visit teaching me more about what I wanted. Not the sprawling suburban houses my parents had leveraged into debt, but something modest and mine. A craftsman bungalow with good bones, a condo with a balcony for containers gardens, a townhouse with a small yard. Grace joined me for some visits, her excitement infectious. She'd started community college while working full-time, following my path, but with more support. Our parents had erupted when she'd declined Columbia, threatening to throw her out. She'd moved into my spare bedroom the next day. "This one has built-in bookshelves," she noted during a Sunday showing. "You could finally unpack all those boxes in storage." The house wasn't perfect. 3 bedrooms in an older neighborhood needing paint and updates, but the foundation was solid. The backyard stretched longer than expected, with raised garden beds some previous owner had built with love. I stood on the back deck imagining tomato plants and herb gardens and felt something shift in my chest. "I want to make an offer." Diana smiled. "I thought you might. Let's write it up." The first offer fell through. Another buyer swooped in with cash, $20,000 over asking. I cried in my car afterward, the rejection hitting harder than it should have. Grace found me there and climbed into the passenger seat. "It wasn't meant to be yours," she said simply. "Your house is still waiting." 3 more rejections followed. Cash offers, waived inspections, escalation clauses I couldn't match. The market felt rigged against first-time buyers with hard-earned down payments instead of family money. Diana kept my spirits up with strategic encouragement. "You only need one yes, and when it comes, it'll be the right one." The right one appeared on a rainy Thursday. A 2-story colonial that had sat on the market for 3 weeks due to dated wallpaper and a questionable paint color, the listing described as unique sage. I walked through the rooms and saw potential everywhere. The inspection came back clean bones solid despite cosmetic flaws. "We can work with ugly," Diana said. Ugly is just opportunity in disguise. My offer went in at asking price with a personal letter about growing up dreaming of a garden, of wanting to paint these walls with my own choices. The seller's an elderly couple downsizing to a retirement community, accepted immediately. They like that you'll actually live here, Diana reported. Not flip it or rent it out. They raise their kids in this house. They wanted it to shelter someone else's dreams. The closing date approached like a birthday and funeral combined. Excitement warred with terror as I signed paper after paper, initializing my commitment to 30 years of mortgage payments. But when the keys dropped into my palm, cool metal against skin that had once blistered from minimum wage labor, I felt only triumph. "Congratulations, homeowner," Diana said, shaking my hand. "You've earned this." I drove to my house, and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes, just staring. Every window represented years of overtime. Every shingle was a skipped meal, a foregone purchase, a careful choice. This wasn't just property. It was proof that a 16-year-old grocery clerk could become something more. Moving day was chaos and joy. Marcus and his wife arrived with a truck and mussels. Sarah brought champagne and a potted orchid, for good luck. My marketing team descended like benevolent locusts carrying boxes and assembling furniture. The empty rooms filled with laughter and possibility. "Where do you want this Robert from my MBA study group?" asked, holding a box labeled Kitchen Fancy Dishes. "I don't own fancy dishes." "You do now," Janet called out. "Housewarming gift from your study group. You can't eat MBA-level success off paper plates forever." By evening, my house looked lived in rather than just occupied. Grace and I sat on the living room floor eating pizza from the fancy new dishes surrounded by boxes still needing homes. "Mom called today," she said quietly. "Wanted to know your new address." "What did you tell her?" "That she'd have to ask you herself." Then she launched into a tirade about ungrateful daughters who abandon family. "You're not abandoning anyone. You're choosing yourself." She said when you bought a house, you should have offered to help with their debts first. That family comes before personal luxuries. I laughed, surprising us both. A basic 3-bedroom house is a luxury now after they refinanced their home for your high school, after they spent my college years taking vacations while I ate ramen. She also said, Grace hesitated, she said you probably used their credit somehow, that there's no way you could afford this on your own. The accusation should have stung. Instead, I felt only weary amusement. Even faced with evidence of my success, they had to construct narratives where I was either selfish or fraudulent. The truth that I'd succeeded despite them, not because of them, was unbearable to their worldview. Let them think what they want. I've got proof of every payment, every credit check, every dollar earned. If they want to tell people I'm a thief, they better be prepared for another legal battle. We unpacked boxes until midnight, Grace claiming the guest room that would be hers as long as she needed it. My room faced east, catching sunrise through windows I could open without asking permission. The 3rd bedroom would be my office, complete with the desk I'd bought to celebrate my promotion. That night, in my own bed, in my own house, I lay awake listening to unfamiliar sounds. The settling of floors that belonged to me, the hum of appliances I'd chosen, the whisper of wind through trees I'd need to learn to maintain. Home ownership felt surreal and scary, and absolutely right. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Welcome to the Property Ladder Superstar. Now the real fun begins. Wait until you discover the joy of property taxes." Another from Marcus. "Proud of you, homeowner. Remember when we thought having our own apartment was the dream? Look at you now." Grace knocked softly, peeking around the door. "Can't sleep either. Too excited, too terrified, too everything." She climbed into bed beside me like she had as a child during thunderstorms, back when I could still protect her from obvious dangers. "Remember when you used to tell me stories about the house we'd have someday, with a garden and enough bedrooms for everyone to have their own space?" I remember. "You did it, Rosie. You made the fairy tale real, without magic or princes or anyone's help." I had help, just not from where we expected. That makes it better, doesn't it? Choosing your own fairy godmothers? I thought about Dorothy and her envelope of faith, Carlos and his warm kitchen refuge, Jennifer fighting my legal battles, Sarah opening doors I didn't know existed, Diana negotiating my dreams into reality, Marcus steady as a heartbeat through every crisis. Yeah, I agreed, pulling my sister closer. Chosen fairy godmothers are definitely better. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through my windows, illuminating dust motes that dance like possibilities. My house, my mortgage, my achievement that no one could claim or diminish or steal. The 16-year-old girl stocking shelves had traveled further than miles could measure. Grace was already in the kitchen making coffee in the machine we'd unpacked last night. First breakfast in your new house. What'll it be? Anything but ramen or peanut butter crackers. I think we can manage that. We cooked eggs and toast, simple food that tasted like victory. My phone rang, Diana checking in, making sure everything was perfect. Then Sarah inviting us to dinner to celebrate properly. Then Marcus offering to help install shelves. Each call reminded me that I'd built more than financial success. I'd constructed a network of people who celebrated my wins without calculating what they could extract, who offered help without hidden invoices, who saw my worth beyond my utility. The doorbell rang as we were washing dishes. A delivery driver stood outside with an enormous flower arrangement. I signed confused and carried it inside. The card was written in my Aunt Helen's careful script. Rosemarie. I heard about your house through the family grapevine. Whatever stories they're spinning, I know the truth. You did this yourself with the strength they never recognized. Welcome home, sweetheart. You've earned every square inch. Love, Aunt Helen. I set the flowers on my dining table, my table in my house, and let the tears fall freely. Somewhere in the extended family ecosystem of lies and taking sides, truth had survived. Someone else had watched my journey and seen it clearly. She's right, you know, Grace said softly. You earned every square inch, and I'm so proud to be your sister. The house would need work, paint and repairs, and probably a new water heater eventually. But it was mine to improve, mine to tend, mine to fill with chosen family and real celebration. The foundation was solid, built on years of sacrifice and determination. Just like me, 3 months of homeownership had established comfortable rhythms. Saturday mornings in the garden, coaxing tomatoes and peppers from soil I'd enriched myself. Sunday dinners with Grace and whatever friends could join. Evenings in my home office working on strategies that would elevate Brennan Industries to new heights. The certified letter arrived on a humid Saturday morning in August. I'd been weeding the garden bed's dirt under my fingernails and sweat on my brow when the mail carrier required my signature. The return address made my blood freeze. Hartwell and Associates attorneys at law. Inside, Grace was making breakfast, humming off-key to the radio. I stood at the kitchen counter and opened the envelope with hands that suddenly felt disconnected from my body. Legal language swam before my eyes, but certain phrases burned clear. Plaintiff Robert Winters and Margaret Winters. Defendant Rosemarie Winters. Misappropriation of family resources. Nellie, unjust enrichment. Demands judgment in the amount of $387,000. The number was so absurd I actually laughed, a sharp sound that made Grace turn from the stove. Rosie, what's wrong? I handed her the papers wordlessly, watched her face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally rage. They're suing you for buying a house. Their listed cause is failure to fulfill familial obligations. What does that even mean? It means they've finally lost their minds. I sank into a kitchen chair, my beautiful kitchen in my hard-earned house, and read the complaint thoroughly. According to my parents' lawyer, my accumulation of assets while family members struggled financially constituted a breach of implicit familial contract. They claimed my success was built on their sacrifices, their refinancing, their struggles, their years of going without so I could prosper. This is insane, Grace said, pacing now. They refinanced for my education, not yours. They never gave you anything. Read page 3. Her face paled as she found the section I meant. They'd named her as a co-plaintiff, claiming to represent her interests since I'd deprived my sister of rightful family support by hoarding resources. I didn't agree to this. I would never, Rosie, I swear I didn't know. I know. I pulled her into a hug as she started crying. This is their move, not yours. We'll figure it out. They listed everything. Your salary, your savings, estimates, even the house value. How do they know all this? I asked myself the same question. We spent the morning documenting everything, scanning the lawsuit, making lists of potential lawyers. Jennifer Walsh had moved to corporate law, but she'd recommended colleagues. I left messages with 3 firms, then called Sarah. They did what? Her voice could have frozen fire. Rosie, this is beyond family dysfunction. This is harassment through legal channels. They want $387,000. That's more than this house cost. More than I've made in the last 5 years combined. What's your plan? Find a lawyer, fight back, not let them destroy everything I've built. I'm calling my attorney, Mitchell Harrison, best family law defense in the state. He doesn't come cheap, but I'll figure out the money. No, you'll let me help. This isn't charity, Rosie. This is investing in justice and protecting a valued colleague from predatory behavior. Send me the documents. Mitchell will review them pro bono initially. After we hung up, I sat in my garden watching bees visit the flowers I'd planted. Everything felt fragile suddenly, like my parents could reach through legal papers and snatch away all I'd cultivated. Grace joined me, carrying 2 mugs of tea. I'm 18, she said quietly. They can't force me to be part of this lawsuit, can they? No, you can withdraw your name, file your own response. You're not responsible for their choices. What if I testified for you instead, told the court the truth about our childhoods? That's your choice. But Grace, they'll destroy you for it. You know that, right? You'll be the ungrateful daughter who betrayed family for her sister's money. As opposed to the grateful daughter who helped sue her sister for existing successfully, she laughed bitterly. I'm already the disappointment who chose community college. Might as well be disappointing with integrity. By Monday, Mitchell Harrison had reviewed the case and agreed to represent me. His office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and leather and quiet power. He was younger than expected, early 40s, with prematurely silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. This is one of the most frivolous lawsuits I've ever seen, he said, setting down the complaint. They're essentially suing you for succeeding without them. No legal basis, no valid contract, no grounds whatsoever. The question is why now? I bought a house, posted 1 photo on social media for friends, nothing flashy, just me holding the keys. Show me the post. I pulled it up on my phone. Simple image captioned, "Dreams do come true. Homeowner at last." The likes and comments were all supportive friends and colleagues celebrating my milestone. Mitchell studied it like evidence. Your parents aren't connected to your social media. I blocked them years ago. But Grace wasn't blocked, and if they have access to her accounts... Understanding dawned cold. They've been monitoring me through her social media, watching my life through her connections. Most likely. The timing isn't coincidental. They saw you buy property and thought, asset we can target. The question is whether they're desperate or strategic. Both, Grace said. Dad's business is gone. Mom lost her job last month. They're behind on the mortgage they refinanced for my education. I heard them talking about bankruptcy. So they see their successful daughter and think lawsuit lottery. Mitchell made notes on a legal pad. Here's what's going to happen. I'll file a response and a motion to dismiss. The claims are baseless, but we'll need to document everything. Every dollar you've earned, every expense you've covered yourself, every time they refused to help when you needed it. I've kept everything. Pay stubs from when I was 16, college financial aid documents showing no parental contribution, even text messages where they asked me for money while claiming I owed them support. Good. Grace, I'll need a sworn affidavit that you didn't consent to being named as a plaintiff. Done. What else can I do? Document any conversations about this lawsuit. If they're discussing strategy planning to hide assets or admitting to false claims, we need to know. We left with a battle plan and a retainer agreement that made my stomach clench. Justice wasn't cheap, but losing would cost everything. I authorized the payment and tried not to think about how many overtime hours it represented. Word traveled fast through family networks. By Tuesday, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Aunt Helen called directly, furious. They're telling everyone you're a millionaire who abandoned them to poverty, that you use their connections to get jobs and then refuse to share success. What connections? Dad's failed construction business, Mom's part-time receptionist job. I know, honey, but people believe what they want. Your cousin Beth is posting about family values and remembering where you come from. It's getting ugly. Let them post. The truth will come out in court. That's why I'm calling. I have something that might help. Remember when they borrowed $5,000 for Rosemary's college expenses from Grandma? My heart stopped. What? 8 years ago. Said you needed it for tuition, but were too proud to ask family for help. Grandma gave it gladly, happy to invest in your education. They never paid it back, and she never wanted to make trouble by asking. I never saw a penny of that money. I know, and I have the canceled check, their thank you note, everything. Grandma kept meticulous records. If they want to claim they supported your education, this proves they actually stole money meant for you. Aunt Helen, this is evidence of fraud. Yes, it is, and I'm done watching them paint themselves as victims while you get crucified for succeeding honestly. Send me your lawyer's information. Grandma would want the truth told. That evening, local news picked up the story. Parent sues successful daughter for house down payment made irresistible headlines. Reporters called seeking comments. My company's PR team went into crisis mode. Sarah stood by my desk, radiating protective fury. We're releasing a statement supporting you completely. Any reporter who wants to spin this as corporate greed can deal with our legal department. I never wanted this to affect work. Stop. A company that doesn't protect employees from harassment isn't worth working for. We've got your back. Grace found me that night sitting in my home office staring at financial documents. Building this life had taken everything I had. Now I might lose it all to the people who'd contributed nothing but pain. I recorded them, she said quietly, holding out her phone. Dad called to coach me on what to say in court. I got all of it. I listened to our father's voice explaining how to emphasize my selfishness, how to imply I'd hidden bonuses and raises, how to make the judge believe I'd stolen Grace's future. The calculations in his tone were worse than hatred. This was business to him, a transaction where I was merely an account to liquidate. He actually said I should cry when discussing my college loans, Grace noted. Specific instructions on emotional manipulation. Will you give this to Mitchell? Already emailed, along with 3 other recordings from the past week. They're getting sloppy, saying things they shouldn't. This is going to get so much worse before it gets better. I know. She sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder. But you survived working 3 jobs and eating crackers for dinner. You survived their neglect and their lies and their theft. You'll survive this too. We'll survive this. They came after both of us, Grace. Win or lose, we face it together. Outside, my garden grew in defiance of everything trying to uproot my life. Tomatoes ripened herbs, flourished, flowers bloomed on schedule. Nature didn't care about lawsuits or family betrayal. It just kept growing, reaching for light, developing strong roots that could weather any storm. I would do the same. My parents had finally overplayed their hand, moving from emotional manipulation to legal warfare. They'd taught me to expect nothing from family, to build everything alone. Now those lessons would be their downfall, because I'd learned to document everything, trust carefully, and fight for what was mine. The lawsuit was meant to break me, to drain my resources and force me back into the family dynamic of taking without giving. Instead, it would reveal exactly who they were, not just to me, but to everyone watching. Sometimes the gift wrapped in attack is the clarity to fight back without guilt. They wanted a legal battle, they'd get one. But this time, I wasn't a 16-year-old girl with empty pockets and nowhere to turn. I was Rosemary Winter's homeowner executive survivor. And I was done being anyone's victim. Mitchell Harrison's law firm occupied 3 floors of the Meridian Tower, but the war room he'd designated for my case felt intimate despite its glass walls. Boxes of evidence lined one wall. My entire financial life laid bare in manila folders and digital files. Jennifer Walsh sat at the conference table, having taken a day off from her corporate job to support the transition. Their lawyer is Bradley Stevenson from Hartwell & Associates. Mitchell explained, pulling up the firm's website. He specializes in family financial disputes, usually inheritance battles. The fact they could afford him is interesting. They can't afford groceries, but they hired a downtown lawyer, Grace asked. Contingency basis, most likely. He only gets paid if they win, which means he thinks there's money to be made here. Jennifer leaned forward. Or he took a retainer betting on Rosemary settling to avoid publicity. That's what we need to establish. Are they looking for a quick payday or prepared for a long fight? My phone buzzed with another unknown number, the 20th today. I sent it to voicemail, already knowing the script, a distant relative calling to mediate, to remind me about family bonds, to suggest I just give my parents something to make this go away. Local news wants a statement, Sarah said, entering with my PR manager. We've had 3 interview requests this morning. No interviews until Mitchell approves, I said. But I won't hide either. They started this public fight. The afternoon was devoted to depositions preparation. Mitchell walked me through potential questions, teaching me to answer truthfully, but minimally. Every word mattered in legal proceedings, he reminded me. Truth was my shield, but oversharing was a sword they'd turn against me. They'll try to make you emotional, he warned. Bring up childhood memories. Family holidays make you seem cold for succeeding while they struggled. Stay factual. Emotions are for closing arguments, not depositions. The first real confrontation came 2 weeks later at the preliminary hearing. I dressed carefully, professional but not flashy, wanting to appear successful but not wealthy. Grace sat behind me in the gallery, her affidavit already filed, stating she hadn't consented to being a plaintiff. My parents entered like they owned the courtroom, dad in a suit I recognized from Grace's high school graduation, mom clutching a tissue she'd yet to need. They didn't look at me, focusing instead on their lawyer's whispered instructions. Bradley Stevenson stood to present their case, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who'd made juries cry. He painted a picture of struggling parents who'd sacrificed everything for their daughters' futures, only to be abandoned by the elder who hoarded success while family suffered. My clients refinanced their home to provide educational opportunities, he intoned, worked multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. Meanwhile, Ms. Winters accumulated significant wealth, while claiming she owed them nothing. Judge Patricia Corman, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for dramatics, interrupted. Counselor, I've reviewed the complaint. Where's the legal basis for this claim? What contract was breached? What law was violated? The law of human decency, Your Honor. The implicit contract of family support that... Mr. Stevenson, this is a court of law, not philosophy. Do you have any legal grounds for this lawsuit? We're arguing unjust enrichment and constructive trust, Your Honor. The defendant benefited from family sacrifices, which you'll need to prove with evidence, not speeches. Mr. Harrison... Mitchell stood economical with movement and words. Your Honor, we move for immediate dismissal. This lawsuit has no legal merit, no factual basis, and appears to be harassment disguised as litigation. I'll hear evidence before ruling on dismissal. But Mr. Stevenson, you're on notice. If this proves as baseless as it appears, your clients may face consequences for frivolous litigation. The hearing set trial for 6 weeks out. In the hallway afterward, Mom approached while Dad hung back. This doesn't have to happen, she said, tissue crumpled in her fist. "We just need help, Rosemary. Is that so wrong? Asking our daughter for help?" "You're not asking. You're suing. For almost $400,000. Because you wouldn't listen any other way. You buy a house while we face foreclosure. You earn 6 figures while we can't afford Grace's college. How is that family the same family that refinanced for Grace's high school while I lived in a garage, that took loans in my name without permission, that borrowed money from Grandma for my education that I never saw? That family?" Her mask slipped for just a moment, showing calculation beneath the tears. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can. See you in court, Mom." Grace and I drove home in silence until she suddenly laughed, harsh and bitter. "Did you see Dad's face when the judge mentioned frivolous litigation? Like he just realized this might cost more than they'd gain." "Good, maybe they'll drop it." "They won't. They've told too many people now it's about pride as much as money." She was right. The next 6 weeks brought escalating pressure from all sides. Extended family chose camps. Friends from high school reached out curious about the family drama. My mail filled with letters, some supportive, many, judgmental, all exhausting. Work became my refuge. The Hartley campaign had evolved into a case study taught at business schools, and speaking invitations poured in. Sarah encouraged me to accept them. "Control the narrative," she advised. "Be the successful professional, not the embattled daughter." I spoke at a Women in Business conference about overcoming obstacles, never mentioning the current lawsuit, but letting my history stand as testament. The audience gave a standing ovation when I concluded with, "Sometimes the greatest gift is learning early that you can only depend on yourself. It makes every achievement truly yours." Meanwhile, Mitchell built our defense meticulously. Aunt Helen provided Grandma's records proving my parents had taken money meant for me. Former co-workers testified about my work ethic, hours logged, wages earned. Dorothy, now retired from Merchants Market, flew in at her own expense. "That girl worked every shift I'd give her," she told Mitchell during prep. "Holidays, weekends didn't matter. Never once heard her mention family help. Just pure determination in a 16-year-old body." Carlos couldn't travel, but provided an affidavit about my time at the diner, including the night I'd collapsed from exhaustion after my parents' hospital visit. Marcus compiled every instance he'd witnessed of my financial struggles, from sharing food to helping with emergency grant applications. The evidence mounted pay stubs, tax returns, financial aid documents, bank statements, showing every dollar earned and spent. My life laid out in paper trails that proved one thing definitively: I'd built this alone. 3 days before trial, Grace made a decision that changed everything. "I'm going to testify," she announced over dinner. "Not just an affidavit, in person on the stand." "Grace, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. They named me as a plaintiff against my will. They're using my name to hurt you. I need to tell the truth about our family." "They'll never forgive you." "They never forgave you for succeeding. At least I'll be in good company." She spent hours with Mitchell preparing testimony, documenting instances of favoritism, financial manipulation, and lies told about my supposed selfishness. Her 18-year-old voice carried devastating clarity about growing up as the golden child, watching the scapegoat survive. "I had violin lessons while Rosie had 3 jobs. She practiced. Private school while she lived in a garage. They told me she was too proud for help, but I learned they never offered any." The night before trial, I couldn't sleep. My house felt both fortress and target, something precious they were trying to steal. I wandered to the garden, finding peace in soil and growing things. Grace found me there at dawn, planting bulbs for spring. "Optimistic planting for next season," she observed. "Stubbornly hopeful. If they take the house, someone should enjoy the flowers." "They won't take anything. We won't let them." My phone rang, Mitchell's voice tight with controlled excitement. "Bradley Stevenson just called. They want to meet. I think they're getting cold feet about trial." "What do you recommend?" "Hear them out. Sometimes the threat of public testimony is stronger than the testimony itself." We met at Mitchell's office that afternoon. My parents looked older, smaller, like the fight was draining them as much as me. Bradley spoke first, all smooth professionalism. My clients are willing to drop the lawsuit for a modest settlement, $50,000, and everyone walks away clean. No. Rosemary, Mom started, but I held up my hand. You sue me for nearly $400,000, drag my name through mud, try to steal my sister's voice, and now want $50,000 to go away? No. Then we'll see you in court, Bradley said, gathering papers. Yes, you will, and everyone will hear exactly who you are. Every lie, every manipulation, every dollar stolen. Grace will testify. Aunt Helen will testify. My entire history will be public record. Is that what you want? Dad spoke for the first time, voice rough. You'd destroy your own family. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just done protecting you from consequences. They left without another word. Mitchell smiled grimly. They'll either drop the suit tonight or double down tomorrow. Either way, we're ready. That evening, surrounded by chosen family in my living room, I felt the strange peace that comes from accepting battle. Win or lose, the truth would finally be told. No more hiding family dysfunction behind closed doors. No more protecting people who'd never protected me. Grace raised her wine glass. To telling the truth, whatever comes. To family you choose, Sarah added. To justice, Mitchell concluded. We drank to all of it, to friendship and truth and the courage to fight back. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight I was exactly where I belonged, in my own home, with people who loved me without calculating my worth. The war my parents started was about to become very public. They'd counted on my shame keeping me silent, my success making me settle. They'd miscalculated on both counts. Because Grace was right, I'd survived worse than lawsuits. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. The morning of trial arrived gray and drizzling Seattle weather, matching my mood. I dressed carefully in the navy suit Sarah had insisted on buying me, professional but not ostentatious. Grace emerged from the guest room in a simple black dress, looking older than her 18 years. Ready. I asked, though neither of us truly was. Ready to tell the truth. The courthouse steps were slick with rain. Inside, the hallways buzzed with typical legal chaos, but our case had drawn unusual attention. Local reporters clustered near courtroom 4B, and I recognized several extended family members in the gallery. Mitchell met us at counsel's table, calm and prepared. Bradley tried one more settlement offer this morning, $25,000. Still no. Good. That desperation tells me they know they're losing. My parents entered with Bradley, Mom clutching Dad's arm like she might collapse. Their performance had already begun. They sat at the plaintiff's table without acknowledging us, whispering urgently with their lawyer. Judge Corman entered precisely at 9 no nonsense in her black robes. Good morning. We're here for Winters vs. Winters case number 2024 FC 892. Mr. Stevenson, you may present your opening statement. Bradley rose, painting his now familiar portrait of parental sacrifice and filial ingratitude. But something felt different. His delivery lacked yesterday's passion, as if he knew the performance was futile. The evidence will show that Robert and Margaret Winters invested everything in their daughter's futures, only to be abandoned by the defendant in their time of need. This is about more than money, it's about family values and moral obligations. Mitchell's opening was surgical in its precision. Your Honor, the evidence will show that my client Rosemary Winters built her success entirely through her own efforts without family support, and often despite family sabotage. The plaintiff's lawsuit isn't just baseless, it's an attempt to steal what they never helped create. We'll prove that, far from supporting Rosemary's education, the plaintiffs actively hindered it while fraudulently obtaining money in her name. The first witness was my father. Bradley led him through a rehearsed narrative of financial struggle and parental dedication. Dad spoke of sleepless nights worrying about bills, the decision to refinance for the girls' education, the pain of watching one daughter succeed while family suffered. Mitchell's cross-examination was devastating in its simplicity. Mr. Winters, you testified that you refinanced your home for the girls' education. How much of that money went to Rosemary's college expenses? Well, we had to make choices. It's a simple question. How much? Grace had exceptional opportunities. So zero. None of the refinancing went to Rosemary. Dad's jaw tightened. She was working. She didn't need... Motion to enter Plaintiff's Exhibit 14. Your Honor, Mr. Winters, is this your signature on a loan application stating the refinancing was specifically for Grace's private high school? Yes. And Exhibit 15, is this your handwriting on a financial aid form stating you would provide $0 for Rosemary's college expenses? She insisted on independence. The form is dated 2 months before she started working. How could she insist on independence before having any income? The questioning continued, each answer revealing new contradictions. By the time Dad stepped down, his story had unraveled completely. Mom took the stand next tissues, ready voice trembling with manufactured emotion. She spoke of maternal heartbreak of a daughter who chose career over family, who hoarded wealth while parents faced foreclosure. Bradley guided her through practiced responses until she mentioned the money from Grandma. A small family gift to help with household expenses, she explained. Mother understood how hard things were. Mitchell pounced. Mrs. Winters, I'm showing you Defense Exhibit 8. Can you read what's written on this check's memo line? Mom's face went pale. It says, for Rosemary's college. And the amount? $5,000. Did any of this money go to Rosemary's college expenses? We had bills. Yes or no? Did any of this $5,000 specifically designated for Rosemary's college actually go to her education? No. What would you call taking money meant for one purpose and using it for another? Bradley objected, but the damage was done. Aunt Helen testified next, bringing Grandma's meticulous records and her own witnessed memories. Mother was so proud to help with Rosemary's education, she stated firmly. She lived frugally her whole life to help her grandchildren, to learn that money never reached its intended recipient. It's theft, plain and simple. Objection, Bradley called. The witness is speculating. Overruled. The check clearly states its purpose. Continue, Ms. Martinez. Aunt Helen provided more documentation, birthday cards where my parents mentioned my supposed college success, while I was actually working 3 jobs, emails discussing family finances that revealed patterns of deception, even a recorded voicemail where Dad admitted to borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. The first day ended with my parents' case in shambles. In the hallway, extended family members avoided eye contact, the easy narrative of ungrateful daughter, harder to maintain faced with evidence. Day 2 brought character witnesses. Dorothy flew in again, her testimony bringing tears to my eyes. I hired a 16-year-old girl who looked hungry, she said simply. Not just for work, but for someone to believe in her. In 4 years, she never missed a shift, never complained, never mentioned family help because there wasn't any. That child raised herself while working harder than adults twice her age. Carlos testified via video link from Arizona where he'd retired. She'd come in for midnight shifts after full days of classes. I'd find her asleep over textbooks in the break room. Once she passed out from exhaustion, no family came to the hospital for hours. Just a kid trying to survive on willpower and black coffee. Marcus took the stand with documentation. I hadn't known he'd kept photos of me asleep in the library receipts from when he'd bought my textbooks, claiming they were extras. Even his journal entries about worrying I'd work myself to death. I watched brilliance almost extinguished by poverty, he stated. While her parents funded private schools and violin lessons for one daughter, Rosemary ate peanut butter for dinner and wore shoes held together with duct tape. She didn't succeed because of family. She succeeded despite them. Sarah testified about my professional growth, careful to avoid company confidential information, but clear about my work ethic and integrity. When Rosemary's parents ambushed her at our offices, she tried to resign rather than bring drama to work. That's who she is, someone who takes responsibility even for things that aren't her fault. The idea that she owes them her success is laughable. They contributed nothing but obstacles. Then came the moment we'd all dreaded and anticipated. Grace took the stand. She looked small in the witness chair, but her voice carried clearly. They name me as a plaintiff without my consent, use my name to attack my sister. I'm here to tell the truth about our family. Her testimony was devastating in its honesty. The golden child revealing the cost of that pedestal, the way our parents had painted me as selfish while taking credit for achievements I'd earned alone. She'd brought her own evidence recordings of our parents coaching her to lie documents showing they'd planned to sell my house if they won even a text where Mom admitted I probably deserve something for all that work, but we need it more. They taught me to see Rosie as the difficult one. Grace said, tears streaming down her face. Too proud, too independent, choosing to struggle. I believed it until I saw her hospital records from college. Malnutrition, exhaustion, working 3 jobs while I had private tutors. She wasn't proud, she was abandoned. By the time Mitchell called me to testify, the case was effectively over. I sat in the witness chair where my family had exposed our dysfunction and felt strangely calm. The truth was already out. All that remained was my perspective. I spoke about the grocery store job, the garage apartment, the nights of hunger and days of exhaustion. But I also talked about Dorothy's kindness, Carlos's compassion, Marcus's friendship, how strangers had become family while family became strangers, how success tasted sweeter for being earned alone, but loneliness echoed louder in an empty house. I would have shared any success gladly. I concluded looking directly at my parents. If they'd ever shown me love without calculation, if they'd celebrated my achievements instead of resenting them, if they'd seen me as a daughter worth investing in, not just a resource to exploit. But they taught me early that I was on my own. I just learned the lesson too well for their liking. Bradley's cross-examination felt perfunctory, as if he knew the verdict was decided. When closing arguments concluded, Judge Corman didn't even recess. I've heard enough. This case is not only dismissed with prejudice, but I'm referring it to the district attorney for potential fraud charges related to the misappropriated funds. Furthermore, the plaintiffs will pay all defendants' legal fees and court costs. She fixed my parents with a stern gaze. Mr. and Mrs. Winters, you've wasted this court's time with a lawsuit that amounts to extortion. Your daughter owes you nothing legally, morally, or otherwise. If anything based on the evidence presented, you owe her far more than money could repay. Case dismissed. Case. The gavel's bang echoed through the courtroom. Mom sobbed real tears this time. Dad stared at the table like a man seeing his reflection clearly for the first time. They left quickly, Bradley shepherding them past reporters shouting questions. In the hallway, our witnesses gathered in an impromptu celebration. Aunt Helen hugged me fiercely. Grandma would be so proud. You fought with grace and truth. That's all anyone can do. Grace stood apart, looking lost. What happens now, I testified against them. I'm officially the second ungrateful daughter. Now you live your life on your terms, I told her, and you always have a home with me. Mitchell interrupted with practicalities. The fraud referral is serious. They could face criminal charges for the misappropriated education funds. I don't want them in jail. That's the DA's decision now, but I'd prepare for more revelations. Financial fraud rarely exists in isolation. He was right. Within days, other stories emerged. 3 more relatives came forward with tales of borrowed money never returned. A former business partner revealed suspicious insurance claims. The house refinancing had funded more than private school gambling debts, failed investments, a web of financial deception spanning years. Local news had a field day. Parents who sued daughter face fraud investigation. Family lawsuit reveals pattern of financial crimes. The narrative shifted from ungrateful daughter to criminal parents, though I took no satisfaction in their downfall. Grace moved permanently into my guest room, legally changing her address and registering for spring semester at the university. We established new traditions, Sunday dinners with chosen family holiday celebrations that didn't end in tears, birthday cards that weren't guilt trips. One evening, as we worked in the garden together, she asked the question I'd been expecting. Do you think they ever loved us? Really loved us, not just what we could provide? I considered lying, offering comfort over truth, but we'd had enough lies. I think they loved the idea of us, the successful daughters who'd validate their choices, when we became real people with our own dreams that love couldn't adapt. So we were always going to end up here estranged and sued. Maybe. Or maybe if they'd gotten help chosen differently, we could have been a real family. But they made their choices and we can't save them from consequences. I still love them, she admitted quietly, even after everything. So do I. That's what makes it hurt. Loving people who can only love conditionally. We worked in companionable silence, planting hope for spring while autumn settled around us. The lawsuit was over, but its revelations would ripple for years. My parents faced potential criminal charges. Extended family had to reckon with decades of deception. And Grace and I had to build lives without the family we'd deserved but never had. But in my garden with my sister beside me and chosen family just a phone call away, I felt something I'd never expected: gratitude. Not for the pain or abandonment or legal battles, but for the strength they'd forged. For the people who'd stepped up when blood stepped back. For the success that was truly, completely mine. The Winters family was shattered beyond repair, but Rosemarie and Grace Winters, we were just beginning to bloom. The coffee shop on Madison Street had become our neutral ground, a place where Grace and I could talk without the walls of my house, holding our shared history. She'd asked to meet privately away from the aftermath of legal documents and family gossip. Her text had been simple: need to talk, just us, important. I arrived early, securing a corner booth with a view of rain-slicked streets. Grace entered looking younger than her 18 years, carrying a laptop bag that seemed to weigh more than its contents. She ordered hot chocolate, still a kid in some ways, and sat across from me with an expression I'd never seen before. "I've been recording them for 2 years," she said without preamble. "Grace, not just recently, since I was 16, since I started realizing the stories didn't match reality." She pulled out her laptop, fingers trembling slightly. "I need to show you something, but first I need you to understand why." I waited, watching my sister gather courage, the way I'd once gathered dollars, carefully and with purpose. The first time was an accident. Mom was on the phone with Aunt Catherine and I was doing homework at the kitchen table. She didn't know I was there. Grace opened a file labeled Family Truths. "Listen." Mom's voice filled our corner of the coffee shop, tinny through laptop speakers, but crystal clear in meaning. Of course, Rosemarie has money saved. We made sure of that. Every time she called needing something in college, we said no, taught her to be independent. Now she thinks she did it all herself, but who do you think taught her that work ethic? We sacrificed her comfort for her future strength. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. She's taking credit for neglect. It gets worse. This is from last year, talking to her book club friend. Another recording. We could have helped Rosemarie more, but honestly, we knew she'd be fine. Grace is different. More fragile, needs support. Sometimes parenting means knowing which child to invest in. Rosemarie was always going to succeed. That kind of stubborn doesn't need help. Grace needs every advantage to compete with her sister's natural drive. "They planned it," I breathed. "The favoritism was strategic." Grace nodded, tears threatening but not falling. "There's more, so much more. But this is why I had to talk to you alone." She clicked another file dated 3 months ago. Dad's voice this time, talking to someone I didn't recognize. The lawsuit was Margaret's idea, but I'll admit it's genius. Either Rosemarie pays out of guilt, or we damage her reputation, enough that she'll need us again. Children who get too independent forget their place. Sometimes you have to remind them who holds the emotional cards. Emotional cards. I felt nauseous. We're a game to them. Not we. You. Grace closed the laptop, meeting my eyes directly. I was never the favorite Rosie. I was the weapon, kept close and polished to use against you when needed. The coffee shop noise faded as I processed this revelation. All those years of watching Grace get everything while I got nothing, and she'd been a tool, not a treasure. When did you figure it out? Gradually. Comments that didn't add up. The way they'd bring up your success whenever I asked for something, like I was in competition for resources. Then I found the papers. What papers? She reached into her bag, pulling out a folder she'd hidden beneath notebooks. Remember when they refinanced for my high school? I found the original documents last year while looking for my birth certificate. They took out an extra $40,000 beyond tuition. I scanned the papers, finding the numbers that confirmed her words. Where did that money go? Dad's gambling debts. Mom's attempt at a makeup MLM. A cruise they took while you were living in that garage. I have the receipts for everything. Her voice broke slightly. They mortgaged our house using my education as an excuse, then spent it on themselves while you starved. Grace, I'm not done. She pulled out more papers. This is a life insurance policy they took out on you when you turned 18. Guess who the beneficiaries are? I stared at the document, seeing my name as the insured, my parents as sole beneficiaries. They bet on me dying. Gets better. Look at the date they increased the coverage. 2 weeks before I was hospitalized for exhaustion. The room spun slightly. They knew I was killing myself with work, and they increased the payout. Mom visited your campus that week. Remember, she said she was checking on you, but you were too busy to meet. I think she was checking if you were close enough to collapse to make it worthwhile. The full horror of it settled over me like a weighted blanket. Every neglect, every refusal of help, every pushed boundary, all calculated to either break me or make me valuable in death. There's one more thing. Grace's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. This is from last week after the trial verdict. Her phone played a conversation between our parents, probably recorded from the next room. Mom, we still have options. Grace is almost 19. If she won't help voluntarily, we can use the recordings we have of her. Dad, what recordings? Mom, I've been documenting her mental health struggles. The anxiety, the therapy sessions she doesn't know I know about. Spin it right and she's unstable, influenced by her sister needs guardianship. Dad, that's dark, Margaret, even for us. Mom, is it darker than letting them both abandon us? Rosemarie poisoned her against us. If we can prove Grace isn't mentally capable of making her own decisions, we get control of any inheritance, any support she might receive. Dad, from who, Rosemarie? Mom, from anyone, including the settlement we'll get when we sue the therapy center for failing to properly treat her. I've already made inquiries. The recording ended. Grace sat perfectly still, 18 years old, and hearing her parents' plan to declare her incompetent for profit. I reached across the table, taking her cold hands in mine. How long have you known about their plans for you? A week. I've been sleeping with a chair against my door, documenting everything, sending copies to a cloud account they don't know about. Tears finally fell silent and steady. I'm their backup plan. If they couldn't get money from you, they'd extract it from me. We need to get you somewhere safe tonight. I can't stay with you. That plays into their narrative of you manipulating me. Then where? I stopped remembering. Marcus's parents have that apartment over their garage. His mom offered it to any student needing emergency housing. Would they? I'll call now. Within an hour, we had a plan. Grace would move to the Chen's apartment, establish independence file for a restraining order based on the recorded threats. Mitchell would handle the legal aspects, including reporting the insurance policy fraud and the conspiracy to defraud mental health services. I have enough evidence to bury them, Grace said as we loaded her belongings into my car. Financial fraud, conspiracy, insurance fraud, planned guardianship abuse. They kept such careful records of everyone else's finances, they forgot I might do the same to them. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, because part of me still hoped I was wrong, that maybe they were just flawed, not evil. that they loved us badly but still loved us. I needed to believe that until I couldn't anymore. We drove to the Chens in silence, rain pattering against windows like typing fingers documenting truth. Mrs. Chen met us at the door, her face kind but fierce. "Any young woman escaping that kind of situation is welcome here," she said firmly. "Grace, you're safe now." As we unloaded boxes, Grace pulled out a thumb drive and handed it to me. "Everything's on here. Every recording, every document, every piece of evidence I've collected. There's enough to put them away for years if the DA pursues it all. What do you want me to do with it?" "Whatever keeps us safe. Whatever stops them from hurting anyone else." She paused at the apartment door. "Rosie, do you think we were ever real to them, or were we always just investments that didn't pay out as expected?" I hugged her tightly, this sister who'd been weapon and victim all at once. We were real to each other. That's what matters now. Back home that night, I sat in my office reviewing Grace's evidence. 2 years of meticulous documentation revealed a pattern of manipulation so calculated it took my breath away. Every family interaction had been transactional. Every moment of affection came with a price tag. Every sacrifice they'd claimed was actually an investment they expected returned with interest. The phone rang, Mitchell calling despite the late hour. "I've reviewed the preliminary files Grace sent. Rosemarie, this is extensive. We're looking at potential RICO charges if the pattern holds. They've been running essentially a family-based financial fraud scheme for decades." RICO like organized crime. Financial exploitation following a pattern across multiple victims over time. That's exactly what RICO covers. Grace's evidence shows they've done this to multiple family members, always using emotional manipulation backed by financial fraud. What happens now? I meet with the DA tomorrow. Grace needs protection immediately. The guardianship threat is serious. But with her evidence, we can likely get a protective order tonight. After we hung up, I wandered through my house, this symbol of independence they'd tried to steal. In every room, I saw the ghost of the girl who'd believed she wasn't worth investing in. Now I understood the truth. They'd invested plenty, just not in my success. They'd invested in my failure, betting I'd either die trying or crawl back begging. When I'd done neither, they'd moved to legal theft. Failing that, they'd turned to Grace, their backup investment always intended for liquidation. My phone buzzed, a text from Grace. "Thank you for believing me. For the first time in my life, I feel like a person, not a pawn." I typed back, "You were never a pawn. You were a queen who learned the game, and now you're free to leave the board entirely." Outside, my garden slept under autumn rain bulbs I'd planted waiting underground for spring. Grace and I were like those bulbs buried by those who should have nurtured us, but finding our own way to light anyway. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more legal battles, more family secrets dragged into daylight. But tonight, both Winter's sisters were safe, free, and finally understanding the truth. We'd never been daughters to them. We'd been investments, and their rage came not from abandonment, but from a failed return. The real abandonment had happened years ago, when they'd looked at 2 little girls and seen only future profit. Grace's evidence would ensure they never profited from anyone's pain again. The federal courthouse downtown rose like a mountain of justice against the November sky. This wasn't family court anymore. Grace's evidence had elevated our case to criminal proceedings. I adjusted my charcoal suit jacket and watched as news vans positioned themselves for the best angles. What had started as a civil lawsuit had exploded into a federal investigation of fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. Mitchell met us at security, his usual calm demeanor carrying an undercurrent of anticipation. The grand jury returned 12 indictments. Your parents, their lawyer Bradley, for knowingly filing fraudulent claims, and 3 other family members who participated in various schemes over the years. 3 others? Grace asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude. Your Uncle Richard, Aunt Catherine, and Cousin Douglas. Grace's recordings revealed a broader pattern. They've been running variations of this scam on extended family for 20 years. We entered courtroom a larger and more intimidating than where our civil case had played out. The gallery was packed with reporters, family members, and curious observers, drawn by headlines like, "Family Fraud Ring Exposed by Daughter's Courage." Prosecutors had given us seats directly behind their table. Across the aisle, my parents sat with their new legal team public defenders, since Bradley was now a co-defendant and their assets were frozen. Mom had aged a decade in the 2 months since our civil trial. Dad stared straight ahead, his contractor's hands folded uselessly on the defense table. All rise for the Honorable Judge Michael Hendricks presiding. Judge Hendricks commanded the room with quiet authority, his reputation for fairness balanced by intolerance for financial predators. As he reviewed the charges, each count felt like another nail in the coffin of our family's facade. The lead prosecutor, Janet Morrison, opened with devastating precision. "Your Honor, the evidence will show a 20-year pattern of financial exploitation, targeting family members, particularly the defendant's own daughters. This wasn't desperation or misunderstanding. This was calculated fraud, treating loved ones as ATMs with emotional PIN codes." The first witness was the FBI financial crimes investigator who'd analyzed Grace's evidence. Charts appeared on screens showing money flows, forged documents, and what he called a sophisticated emotional manipulation pipeline, converting family trust into a legal profit. "Can you explain the life insurance scheme?" Morrison asked. The defendants took out multiple policies on their eldest daughter during periods of documented financial stress and health crisis. The timing suggests they were essentially betting on her collapse or death from overwork. I forced myself to remain composed as he detailed how they'd increased coverage whenever I'd taken on additional jobs or shown signs of exhaustion. Grace gripped my hand as he revealed they'd even researched average life expectancy for people working multiple minimum wage jobs. Uncle Richard testified next, having agreed to cooperate for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed the broader network, how my parents had coached family members on emotional manipulation tactics, shared strategies for guilt-based extraction, even held informal meetings about maximizing returns from successful relatives. It was like a multi-level marketing scheme. He admitted, except the product was family obligation. Margaret would identify targets, usually whoever was doing well financially, and we'd coordinate approaches. Sick relatives who weren't really sick emergencies, that weren't urgent investments that didn't exist. And if someone refused, Morrison prompted. Then came phase 2, public shame, family exclusion, character assassination. We'd make them look selfish, ungrateful, mentally unstable, whatever it took to break them down or extract payment. Aunt Catherine followed her testimony, revealing how they'd targeted elderly relatives, convincing them to change wills or sign over powers of attorney. My grandmother's missing money was just one of dozens of similar thefts disguised as family support. "How much would you estimate was stolen through these schemes?" Morrison asked. "Over $2 million across all victims over 20 years, Catherine replied, not counting emotional damage or lost opportunities for those who gave until they had nothing left. The prosecution presented Grace's recordings methodically, each one building the case for conspiracy. Mom's voice planning my financial destruction, Dad calculating my life insurance value, both discussing how to manipulate Grace's mental health struggles for profit. The gallery sat in horrified silence as recording after recording revealed the calculated cruelty behind parental masks. When Grace took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. She was different from the civil trial, stronger, clearer, no longer the weapon they'd sharpened, but the truth-teller they'd never expected. "They didn't just steal money," she stated clearly. "They stole our ability to trust, to form healthy relationships, to believe we were worthy of love without transaction. Every birthday card came with a guilt trip. Every phone call included a financial request. We weren't daughters, we were revenue streams." "Tell us about the guardianship plot," Morrison instructed. Grace detailed finding documents where our mother had researched adult guardianship laws, consulted with doctors about having Grace declared incompetent, even drafted a business plan for accessing any inheritance or insurance payouts Grace might receive. She called it Project Security. Grace said, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. I was 18 years old and my mother had a business plan for declaring me mentally unfit. The projected revenue included my future earnings, any inheritance from extended family and potential lawsuits against my therapists for failing me. The defense's cross-examination was gentle. Even they knew attacking Grace would play poorly. But she didn't need protecting anymore. "Isn't it true you're angry at your parents?" the public defender asked. "Yes," Grace replied simply. "I'm angry they saw dollar signs where they should have seen daughters. I'm angry they taught us love was conditional on our bank balances. I'm angry it took 18 years to realize I was an investment property, not a child. Wouldn't you be angry?" When I took the stand, I felt the weight of every minimum wage hour, every skipped meal, every night spent choosing between textbooks and food. But I also felt the strength of survival of building a life from nothing while they schemed to steal it. "My parents taught me valuable lessons," I testified. "They taught me that family could be a business model, that love could be leveraged for profit, that success made you a target, not a source of pride. But they also taught me unintentionally how to document everything, trust carefully, and fight back when cornered." I detailed the harassment, the lawsuits, the workplace ambush, the years of emotional manipulation disguised as parental concern. But I also spoke about the chosen family who'd stepped up: Dorothy Carlos Marcus, Sarah Jennifer Mitchell, people who'd given freely what my parents had invoiced. "The prosecution asks you to see my parents as criminals," I concluded. "I ask you to see them as teachers. They taught me the price of misplaced trust and the value of earned love. Without meaning to, they made me strong enough to stop them from doing this to anyone else." The defense's case was anemic. Character witnesses who crumbled under cross-examination, financial records that contradicted their poverty claims, and finally my parents themselves taking the stand in desperate attempts at damage control. Mom cried throughout her testimony, but the tears felt performed after hearing her calculated recordings. She painted herself as a desperate mother, trying to provide for her family, making mistakes out of love. "You call fraud a mistake?" Morrison challenged. "You call attempting to have your daughter declared incompetent for money a mistake? You call life insurance schemes, betting on your child's death, a mistake? I never wanted Rosemarie to die," Mom wailed. "No, you just wanted her to work herself close enough to death that you could increase the coverage. Tell me, Mrs. Winters, what's the difference between wanting someone dead and creating conditions where death becomes profitable?" Dad's testimony was worse. Stripped of Mom's emotional manipulation, he revealed himself as coldly calculating, viewing his daughters as failed business ventures. "Rosemarie owed us," he stated flatly. "We gave her life a roof, the basics. Her success came from our foundation. Grace was supposed to be our security, but Rosemarie poisoned her against us. This is what happens when children forget gratitude." "So you admit to planning these schemes?" His lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Dad had revealed the entitlement beneath the fraud, a belief that children were property with expected returns on investment. Bradley Stevenson, their original lawyer, testified to save himself. He revealed how they'd approached him with manufactured evidence, how he'd discovered the fraud, but proceeded anyway, hoping for a payday, how they'd promised him 30% of any settlement. "I should have withdrawn," he admitted, "but they were convincing. They had documents, stories, tears. By the time I realized it was all fabricated, I was in too deep." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. As the verdicts were read guilty on all counts for both parents, guilty on most counts for the co-conspirators, I felt no joy, only exhaustion. Grace wept silently beside me, mourning parents who'd never existed outside our desperate hopes. Sentencing would come later, but the judge revoked bail given the evidence of ongoing schemes. As marshals prepared to lead them away, Mom turned to us one last time. "I hope you're happy," she said, venom replacing tears. "You've destroyed your own family." "No," I replied steady and clear. You destroyed it the day you decided we were investments instead of daughters. We just documented the demolition." They were led away in handcuffs, and I knew it was the last time I'd see them outside of prison walls. The gallery erupted in movement, reporters seeking comments, family members choosing sides, lawyers exchanging final words. Outside the courthouse, Grace and I stood in unexpected sunshine. Reporters thrust microphones at us, but Mitchell and Morrison formed a protective barrier. "My clients will not be commenting," Mitchell stated. "They've shown incredible courage exposing systematic family fraud. Now they need time to heal from decades of exploitation disguised as love." We slipped away through a side exit, leaving the media circus behind. In my car, Grace finally broke down, completely sobbing for the parents we'd needed, but never had, for the family that might have been, for the love that came with price tags we could never afford. "We're orphans now," she whispered. "Living parents in prison, but orphans anyway." "We were always orphans," I said gently. "We just didn't know it. Now we can stop hoping they'll change and start building something real." "With what we have no family left." "We have each other. We have Sarah and Marcus and everyone who stood by us. We have truth and freedom and futures they can't mortgage. That's not nothing, Grace. That's everything." She nodded, wiping away tears. "So what happens now?" "Now we learn how to be people instead of investments. We go to therapy. We set boundaries. We trust carefully, but love freely. We become the family we deserved, but never had for each other and for anyone else who needs it." The drive home was quiet, both of us processing the magnitude of what had just ended. 20 years of fraud exposed. Parents headed to federal prison. Extended family scattered between shame and denial. The Winters family empire of manipulation had fallen completely. But from its ashes, 2 sisters emerged stronger for having survived. We'd entered that courthouse as victims. We'd left as victors who'd refused to let fraud disguise itself as love anymore. The war was over. The healing could finally begin. The sentencing hearing arrived 6 weeks later on a brittle January morning. Ice glazed the courthouse steps, and I held Grace's arm as we navigated the treacherous approach. Inside, warmth hit us along with the familiar buzz of legal proceedings about to unfold. "Ready for this?" Mitchell asked, meeting us at security. "Ready for it to be over," Grace replied. The courtroom was less packed than during the trial. Sensational testimony had given way to procedural conclusion. But the core players remained prosecutors, defense teams, a handful of reporters and family members still choosing sides in a war that had already been decided. Judge Hendricks entered with his characteristic authority, settling behind the bench with documents that would determine my parents' futures. They sat at the defense table in matching gray, looking smaller than I remembered. Prison jumpsuits had a way of stripping away pretense. "We're here for sentencing in United States versus Winters et al. I've reviewed the pre-sentencing report's victim impact statements and recommendations from both sides. Before I pronounce sentence, does anyone wish to address the court?" Prosecutor Morrison stood. "Your Honor, the government maintains these were not crimes of desperation but calculation. 20 years of systematic fraud targeting those who should have been able to trust them most. We recommend maximum sentences as both punishment and deterrent." The defense attorneys made their pleas first-time offenders in their 60s health issues, family hardship. Each argument rang hollow after the trial's revelations. How could they claim hardship when they'd created it for so many others? "The victims may now address the court," Judge Hendricks announced. I hadn't planned to speak. My testimony during trial felt like enough, but as I watched my parents sit there still, somehow managing to look like martyrs, words rose up demanding release. "Your Honor, may I approach?" He nodded, and I walked to the podium on legs steadier than expected. The courtroom fell silent. "I've spent weeks trying to find forgiveness." I began, my voice carrying clearly. "People say forgiveness is for yourself, not those who wronged you. But how do you forgive parents who bet on your death, who saw your exhaustion as an investment opportunity, who raised you like livestock, calculating your worth by potential profit. I looked directly at them for the first time since their arrest. You stole more than money. You stole our ability to trust, to accept love without suspicion, to believe kindness comes without invoice. Every relationship I've formed carries the shadow of wondering what people really want from me. That's the theft that can't be repaid. Mom started crying. Dad stared at his hands. But you also gave me gifts you never intended. You taught me to document everything which exposed your crimes. You taught me to rely on myself, which let me survive your abandonment. You taught me that family is action, not blood, which led me to people who actually love me. In trying to break us, you forged us into something unbreakable. My voice strengthened. Grace was right during trial. We're angry. We'll be angry for years, maybe forever. But we're also free. Free from manipulation disguised as love. Free from guilt over boundaries. Free from the exhausting hope that this time, maybe this time, you'd choose us over money. I paused, feeling 20 years of weight preparing to lift. I don't forgive you. Not yet, maybe never. But I do release you. From my expectations, my hopes, my desperate need for parents you could never be. Your sentence is your business now. Our lives are ours. Returning to my seat, I felt Grace take my hand. She chose not to speak. Her testimony had said everything necessary, but her squeeze told me I'd spoken for us both. 3 other victims gave statements. Aunt Helen, voice shaking with rage over her mother's stolen money. A cousin describing bankruptcy after trusting their investment advice. A family friend revealing loans, never repaid promises, never kept trust, systematically betrayed for profit. Then, unexpectedly, Mom stood. Your Honor, I'd like to address the court. Judge Hendricks nodded. She approached the podium, slowly looking every one of her 63 years. I've had 6 weeks to think in federal detention, she began, voice small. 6 weeks to replay every recording my daughter made, every document she collected, every moment she documented. Do you know what I realized? She turned to look at us. Grace recorded us for 2 years, 2 years of evidence, which means for 2 years, my 18-year-old daughter knew her parents were monsters and still lived with us, still came to dinner, still hoped we might change. Her voice broke. That's what haunts me. Not the charges or the sentence, but that my baby girl spent 2 years gathering evidence of crimes while probably praying she was wrong. That Rosemary worked herself into the hospital while we increased her life insurance. That we taught them to fear our love because it always came with a bill. She gripped the podium. I won't insult anyone by claiming mental illness or desperation. We knew what we were doing. We justified it as parenting strategy, teaching independence-building character. But really, we were building our retirement fund on our daughters' backs. Dad made a sound of protest, but she continued. I used to blame Rosemary for Grace turning against us. But the truth is, we turned them against us every time we chose schemes over affection, profit, over pride in their achievements. They didn't abandon family, we abandoned them first the day we assigned them monetary value instead of unconditional love. She looked at Judge Hendricks. Whatever sentence you give won't be enough for what we stole from them. Not money that's replaceable. We stole their right to be children who trusted their parents. That's a life sentence we gave them first. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even Morrison seemed taken aback by the admission. Mom returned to her seat, Dad refusing to look at her. Whatever united front they'd maintained had cracked beyond repair. Judge Hendricks reviewed his notes before speaking. In 23 years on the bench, I've rarely seen financial fraud so intertwined with emotional abuse. The defendants didn't just steal money, they weaponized love, commercialized family bonds, and treated their own children as commodities. He addressed my parents directly. Your daughter said you taught her that family is action, not blood. Your actions have been criminal, cruel, and calculating. The court sentences Margaret Winters to 8 years federal prison for conspiracy fraud and racketeering. Robert Winters, 10 years for the same, plus the insurance fraud scheme which the court finds particularly heinous. Gasps rippled through the gallery. 8 years, 10 years. Numbers that meant missing Grace's college graduation, my future wedding grandchildren they'd never meet. Not that they'd earned invitations to any of those milestones. Bradley Stevenson, 3 years for conspiracy and ethics violations. The remaining defendants. He continued through lighter sentences for the co-conspirators, but I barely heard. My parents would spend the better part of a decade in federal prison. By the time they emerged, we'd be strangers in truth as well as feeling. Additionally, Judge Hendricks continued, restitution is ordered to all victims based on documented losses. The defendant's assets will be liquidated to pay these debts before any remaining funds go to their own use. He banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. Defendants are remanded to custody to begin serving their sentences immediately. The marshals approached my parents. Mom looked back one last time, mouthing something that might have been, "I'm sorry," or might have been my imagination filling in what I needed to see. Dad never turned around, shuffling toward his decade of consequences with the same stubborn pride that had brought him there. Grace and I sat frozen as the courtroom emptied around us. Morrison approached with unexpected gentleness. "You two showed more courage than anyone should have to. The restitution won't heal what they broke, but it's something. Their house cars, any hidden assets, it all goes to victims." "We don't want their money," Grace said quietly. "We never did." "Then donate it. Create scholarships. Help other kids trapped in transactional families. Turn their greed into someone else's freedom." After she left, Mitchell helped us navigate the reporters outside. We gave brief statements about justice served and healing, beginning then, escaped to my car. The drive home was silent until Grace suddenly laughed, not happy, but not entirely sad either. 10 years, she said. "Do you think they'll learn anything?" "Mom might." That speech felt real. "Dad," I shrugged. "He'll probably run investment scams in prison." Using cigarettes as currency instead of daughters. The gallows humor felt necessary, a pressure valve on emotions too large for the moment. We drove through Seattle's January drizzle toward my house, our house really. Grace had made the guest room hers, adding touches that made it feel permanent. Fairy lights photos of us from better moments, a desk where she studied for classes they'd never ask about. Sarah waited on my porch with Marcus and his wife bundled against the cold but determined to be present. They'd watched the live stream, knew we'd need support more than solitude. 8 and 10 years, Sarah said, pulling us both into hugs. "How do you feel?" "Empty," I admitted. "Like I've been carrying this weight so long, I don't know how to stand without it." "Relieved," Grace added, "and guilty for feeling relieved. And angry for feeling guilty. It's complicated." Marcus had brought food, his mother's soup that had sustained me through college, now offering comfort after a different kind of trial. We gathered in my kitchen-chosen family, filling the space with warmth my blood family never had. "You know what the best revenge is?" Sarah asked as we ate. "Living well. They'll spend a decade in cells while you build lives they could never imagine. Success, they can't claim happiness. They can't invoice love. They can't leverage." "The Winters Sisters Foundation," Grace said suddenly, "for kids escaping financial abuse. We use the restitution money to help others like us trapped in families that see them as ATMs, not children." "I love it," I said. "Dorothy can help us identify kids working too young, too hard. Carlos knows every late-night worker trying to escape something. We build the network we wished we'd had." The afternoon stretched into evening plans, taking shape between tears and laughter. The foundation would offer emergency housing, legal aid, educational grants, everything we'd needed, and found piecemeal, or not at all. Our parents' schemes would fund freedom for their spiritual successors. "They'd hate this," Grace noted with satisfaction. "Their stolen money helping ungrateful children escape toxic families." Good. Let their legacy be the opposite of their intentions. After everyone left, Grace and I sat in my living room, our living room, processing the day's finality. 8 years, 10 years, numbers that meant nothing and everything too much and not enough. Justice served cold after decades of heat. "Do you think we'll visit?" Grace asked. "In prison?" "I don't know. Maybe. When we're ready. If we're ever ready. I might write. Not for them, but for me. Things I need to say without them interrupting or manipulating. One-way communication until I decide if I want two-way again." "That's healthy." Therapist approved. Therapist suggested, actually. She smiled wryly. "Apparently, I have significant trauma requiring extensive processing. Shocking, right?" We laughed because crying felt redundant. The tears would come in therapy in quiet moments in future milestones, attended by chosen family instead of blood. But tonight, we'd survived the final battle of a war we'd never asked to fight. "We're free," I said, testing the words. Really, actually free. Free to be angry, free to heal, free to choose who deserves our love and who pays full price for trying to invoice it. Outside, January, rain washed Seattle clean for tomorrow's possibilities. Inside, two sisters sat planning futures. No one could steal processing justice that felt both hollow and necessary, building something real from the ashes of conditional love. 8 years, 10 years, a lifetime of recovery. The verdict was rendered. The real work learning to trust, to love without suspicion, to believe we deserved good things, without earning them through suffering, would take longer than any prison sentence. But we'd begin tonight together, finally understanding that survival was just the first step. Now came the harder part, learning to truly live. Spring arrived early that year, cherry blossoms blooming throughout Seattle like hope made visible. I stood in my backyard watching Grace plant vegetables in the raised beds, her movements careful but confident. 6 months had passed since the sentencing, and we were both different people, not healed, but healing. "Tomatoes here?" she asked, holding up seedlings. "Perfect. They'll get full afternoon sun." We worked in companionable silence, dirt under fingernails, feeling like therapy. The house had become truly ours, walls repainted in warm colors, furniture chosen for comfort over appearance, spaces designed for living rather than impressing. "Dr. Kim says I'm making progress." Grace mentioned, casually referring to her therapist. "Yesterday I accepted a compliment without immediately wondering what they wanted from me. She called it a breakthrough." "That is a breakthrough. I still struggle with that." "Your therapist would say that's normal after what we've been through." What we'd been through. Such simple words for decades of manipulation, months of legal battles, and a lifetime of rewiring our understanding of love and worth. But therapy helped twice a week for both of us, slowly untangling the knots our parents had tied in our ability to trust. My phone buzzed Sarah, texting about the foundation meeting that afternoon. In 6 months, the Winters Sisters Foundation had grown from angry idea to active nonprofit. Using the restitution money as seed funding, we'd already helped 12 young adults escape financially abusive families. "Remember dinners at 6, I told Grace. "Marcus and Lynn are coming, plus Sarah and her partner." Our monthly chosen family dinner. I made dessert from scratch, not a mix. Look at me adulting. These dinners had become sacred, gathering those who'd stood by us through the trial and its aftermath. No guilt trips, no hidden invoices, just people who showed up because they wanted to be there. That afternoon, I drove to the Foundation's small office in Fremont. We'd kept overhead low-focusing resources on direct aid. Sarah was already there with our volunteer coordinator reviewing applications. 23 new applications this week, Sarah reported. Word spreading through social media. Kids trapped in situations like yours, finally seeing a way out. Each application told a familiar story. Parents who saw children as investments, love conditional on financial return success, punished instead of celebrated. We approved emergency housing for a 19-year-old whose parents had drained her college savings, legal aid for a 22-year-old fighting fraudulent loans in his name, and counseling funds for 3 others escaping emotional manipulation. Dorothy called, our coordinator mentioned. She's identified 2 teenage employees showing signs of financial abuse, wants to know our protocols for intervention. Dorothy, now 75, served on our board with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd watched too many kids struggle alone. She'd created a network of employers willing to hire young people escaping toxic families, understanding they needed flexibility and patience alongside paychecks. Set up a meeting. I decided. We need careful documentation before approaching anyone. These parents know how to manipulate systems. Speaking of parents, Sarah said carefully, you got another letter. She handed me the envelope, federal prison postmark familiar. Mom wrote weekly, Dad monthly. I'd read the first few, then started filing them unopened. Grace read hers sometimes, sharing excerpts that ranged from self-pity to what might have been genuine remorse. I'll file it with the others, I said. Maybe someday I'll be ready, not today. No judgment either way. Healing isn't linear. After the meeting, I drove to the university district where Grace attended classes. She'd chosen social work as her major, wanting to help other survivors of family trauma. At 20, she carried herself differently, confident but cautious, optimistic but realistic. How was child psychology, I asked as she slid into the passenger seat. Fascinating and triggering. We studied attachment disorders. Basically got a roadmap of our childhood dysfunction. Professor wants me to write about my experiences for extra credit. Will you? Maybe. Dr. Kim thinks it might be therapeutic. Turn trauma into teaching, you know. We stopped at the grocery store shopping for dinner together. Such a simple thing, but it felt revolutionary, choosing food based on desire rather than desperation, buying ingredients for joy rather than survival. Grace loaded the cart with fresh produce while I selected wine for our guests. Remember when you lived on peanut butter and crackers? She asked suddenly. Hard to forget. Why, I used to feel so guilty eating full meals while you starved. They told me you chose poverty, but part of me knew better. I just didn't know how to help without making things worse. You were a kid, Grace. A manipulated kid trying to survive, too. I know, Dr. Kim reminds me weekly, but knowing and feeling are different things. Back home, we cooked together a feast of abundance after years of scarcity. Lemon herb chicken, roasted vegetables from our garden, fresh bread from the bakery where one of our foundation kids now worked. Grace's chocolate cake cooled on the counter, proof of growth beyond survival skills. Our guests arrived in overlapping waves. Marcus and Lynn brought homemade dumplings. Sarah and her partner David contributed wine and elaborate cheese boards. Jennifer Walsh, who'd become friend rather than just legal counsel, brought flowers from her garden. To chosen family, Sarah toasted as we gathered around the dining table. To healing that happens in community, to futures nobody can steal. We clinked glasses, the sound like bells announcing freedom. Conversation flowed easily. Marcus's promotion, Lynn's pregnancy announcement, Jennifer's transition to nonprofit law inspired by our case, normal problems and joys of people living rather than just surviving. The Times wants to do a follow-up story. Sarah mentioned over dessert. 6 months later, where are they now, that sort of thing. What would we even say? Grace wondered. We're in therapy and planting gardens. We started a foundation, we eat vegetables now, it's not exactly dramatic. That's the point, Jennifer said. Healing isn't dramatic. It's daily choices to trust, to try to believe you deserve good things. It's revolutionary in its ordinariness. After dinner, we sat on my deck watching sunset paint the sky. Grace had strung lights that made the space feel magical, transforming a simple backyard into sanctuary. Our guests lingered, nobody rushing to leave this pocket of peace. I've been thinking about forgiveness, Grace said suddenly. Not for them, but for me. Dr. Kim says forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means releasing the anger so it stops poisoning you. Are you ready for that? Marcus asked gently. Not yet, but maybe someday. When holding on to anger takes more energy than letting it go. I'm stuck on accountability, I admitted. They're serving their sentences, but have they really learned anything? Mom's letters seem genuine sometimes, but I remember her trial performance too. Maybe that's not your burden, Lynn suggested. Whether they learn or not change or not, that's their journey. Yours is healing regardless of their growth. The evening wound down naturally, friends departing with hugs and plans for next month. Grace and I cleaned up together, falling into easy rhythms we'd developed as true roommates rather than refugees. Good day, she declared, drying dishes. Foundation helped 3 kids' dinner was delicious, nobody cried. Victory. Small victories count. Dr. Martinez says healing happens in moments, not milestones. Speaking of milestones, I got an email from Columbia today. They want me to reapply for next fall with significant financial aid based on my circumstances and grades. I stopped washing, turning to face her. Columbia, your dream school. Was it my dream or theirs? That's what I'm figuring out, but I have options. Now stay here, transfer there, take a gap year to work with the foundation. The point is, they're my choices. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Actually, support, not manipulate disguised as help. I know, that's the miracle, right? Learning what real support looks like. Later in my home office reviewing foundation applications, I found myself thinking about rebuilding. Not just lives or trust, but entire worldviews. We'd been raised in a reality where love was transaction, success was threat, and family was business. Now we were constructing something different where love was freely given, success was celebrated, and family was chosen. My phone lit up with a text from one of our foundation kids. Got the job at the bookstore. Thank you for believing in me when my family wouldn't. These moments made everything worthwhile, the trials, the pain, the long journey to healing. Every kid we helped escape was proof that cycles could break, that manipulation, disguised as love, didn't have to be hereditary. Grace knocked on my door. Can't sleep, want to watch something mindless. We curled up on the couch with tea and terrible reality TV, commenting sarcastically on manufactured drama. Such a normal sister moment, but precious for its ordinariness. No hidden agendas, no emotional invoices, just 2 survivors learning to be siblings without the weight of parental manipulation. I love you, Grace said during a commercial break. Not because I have to or because you've earned it, but just because. Is that weird to say? Not weird, revolutionary, I love you too, just because. We'd rebuilt so much in 6 months' routines and relationships and trust in tomorrow. The foundation helped others escape. Therapy helped us understand. Chosen family helped us believe in unconditional love. Gardens helped us remember that growth took time, but yielded beauty. Our parents served their sentences in federal facilities 3 states away. We served hours in therapy offices and support groups learning to commute life sentences of trauma into manageable terms of recovery. Neither sentence would end quickly, but ours at least carried hope for parole. The cherry blossoms would fade, replaced by summer abundance, autumn reflection, winter dormancy, and spring renewal again. Seasons of healing cycling through years of learning to live as people, not investments. We were rebuilding everything from foundation up, and this time we were using better materials, truth boundaries, chosen family, and the radical belief that we deserved love without earning it through suffering. The Winter Sisters were becoming who we might have always been had love been free rather than invoiced. It was slow work, daily work, worthwhile work, and we were doing it together, which made all the difference. Tomorrow would bring more foundation applications, more therapy sessions, more moments of choosing trust over suspicion. But tonight we had bad TV and sisterly snark and the quiet revolution of loving without calculation. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 1 year after the trial, I stood before an audience of 200 at the Seattle Convention Center. The Winter Sisters Foundation's first annual fundraising gala had drawn nonprofit leaders, social workers, and survivors who'd become advocates. But what made my hands tremble wasn't the crowd, it was the 2 figures seated at table 12. "You sure about this?" Grace whispered beside me, radiant in the emerald dress she'd bought with her own money from her part-time job. No, but Dr. Martinez says confronting fear in controlled environments builds resilience." Pretty sure she meant fear of spiders, not fear of relatives fresh from federal prison. Aunt Helen and Uncle Richard had served their reduced sentences and reached out through Jennifer wanting to make amends. After months of therapy-guided consideration, we'd invited them to attend, not forgive, just witness what their exposure had helped create. "Ladies and gentlemen," our MC announced, "please welcome Winters Sisters Foundation co-founders Rosemarie and Grace Winters." Applause carried us to the podium where Grace took the microphone first. At 21, she commanded attention with hard-won confidence. 3 years ago, I started recording my parents because something felt wrong about our family dynamics. I was 16, confused and desperate to understand why love felt like a business transaction. Those recordings eventually sent my parents to federal prison and exposed a 20-year pattern of family financial fraud. The room sat silent, captivated by her steady voice. Tonight we celebrate something beautiful born from ugliness. In our first year, the Winters Sisters Foundation has helped 47 young adults escape financially abusive families. We've provided emergency housing, legal aid counseling, and most importantly, proof that love shouldn't come with invoices. She turned to me, and I took the microphone, finding strength in the familiar faces scattered throughout the crowd. Dorothy at table 1, tissues already out, Marcus and Lynn with their 6-month-old daughter named Hope, Sarah and David, who'd just gotten engaged, Jennifer Walsh, who'd left corporate law to become our legal director. Financial abuse within families is the silent epidemic. I began my voice growing stronger with each word. It hides behind cultural expectations of filial duty, behind shame that keeps victims quiet, behind the devastating belief that if your own parents see you as an ATM, you must not be worthy of real love. I shared statistics we'd gathered. 1 in 4 young adults experience some form of financial exploitation by family members. 60% never reported it. 90% blame themselves. We're changing that narrative. Every young person sleeping safely in our transitional housing, every successful legal intervention against fraudulent loans, every therapy session funded, these aren't just services. They're declarations that you deserve love without conditioned support, without manipulation, and a future nobody can steal. The presentation continued with success stories read by volunteers to protect privacy. A nursing student whose parents had taken loans in her name now graduating debt-free after legal intervention. A young man whose family had controlled his disability benefits now living independently with proper support. Twin sisters who'd escaped together now, both in college pursuing dreams their family had tried to monetize. Our expansion plans include 3 more transitional houses, a dedicated legal clinic, and a mentorship program pairing survivors who've rebuilt with those just beginning to escape. But we need your help. Grace took over for the fundraising portion, her natural warmth making asking for money feel like offering partnership. Within 20 minutes, we'd exceeded our goal by 40%. Local businesses pledged internships. Therapists volunteered pro bono hours. A tech entrepreneur who'd escaped his own toxic family wrote a check for 6 figures. During the dinner break, Aunt Helen approached our table. Prison had aged her, but her eyes held something they'd lacked before: genuine remorse. "I won't ask for forgiveness," she said quietly. "I participated in something unforgivable, but watching you transform our family's poison into medicine for others, I'm proud of you both." Uncle Richard stood beside her, uncomfortable but present. "We're starting a support group for perpetrators of financial abuse, not excuse-making but accountability work, teaching others to recognize the patterns before they destroy their families like we did. That's a start." I managed, not ready for more, but acknowledging the effort. They didn't linger, understanding that presence was privilege enough. Grace watched them return to their table with conflicted emotions. It's weird seeing them try to be better people. Easier when they were just villains. Healing's harder when everyone's human, I agreed. The program resumed with our keynote speaker, a nationally recognized expert on family financial abuse who'd cited our case in recent publications. She spoke about the intersection of love and money, how financial control masqueraded as concern, how breaking free required extraordinary courage. The Winters sisters didn't just survive their ordeal, she concluded. They transformed it into a lifeline for others. That's the difference between victimhood and victory, using your pain to prevent someone else's. The formal program ended with Grace and I presenting the first annual Phoenix Award to a survivor who'd escaped with nothing but rebuilt everything. She accepted with tears, clutching the crystal sculpture of a bird rising from flames. 5 years ago, I slept in my car rather than give my parents access to my bank accounts again. Tonight I own a home, run a business, and most importantly, know I deserve good things. This foundation saved my life by showing me I wasn't alone, wasn't crazy, wasn't ungrateful, just a person who refused to be an ATM anymore. As the gala wound down, people approached with donations, volunteer offers, and too many personal stories of financial manipulation within families. Each conversation reinforced why we'd started this work. The silence around family financial abuse was deafening until someone spoke first. Rosemarie. A hesitant voice made me turn. A woman my age stood nervously with a teenage girl. I'm Monica Chen from the Times article last year. This is my daughter, Ashley. We need help. I guided them to a quiet corner where Monica revealed a familiar story. Parents who'd refinanced their house for her future then demanded repayment with interest, who'd taken credit cards in her name claiming family emergency, who now wanted Ashley's college fund as payment for raising her. The foundation can help, I assured them, pulling out Jennifer's card. Legal consultation first, then we'll discuss housing if needed. You're not ungrateful. You're not selfish. You're protecting yourself and your daughter from exploitation. Ashley spoke for the first time. Is it really abuse if they're family? Everyone says I should be grateful they raised me. Grace appeared beside us, having noticed the conversation. Raising children is the minimum legal requirement of becoming a parent, not a loan to be repaid. Love isn't supposed to have terms and conditions like a credit card agreement. We connected them with Jennifer and watched them leave with something they'd lacked, walking in hope. The convention center slowly emptied, but our core team lingered, riding the high of exceeding every goal. Sarah pulled up her phone, showing social media posts from attendees. Winter Sisters Gala is trending locally. People are sharing their own stories, asking how to help, asking for help. You've started something bigger than a foundation, you've started a movement. We just gave it a name and a structure, I deflected. The need was always there. That's what leaders do, Jennifer added. They see unmet needs and meet them. Speaking of which, the Washington Post wants to do a feature on family financial abuse centered on the foundation. National exposure could help so many. We agreed to consider it, knowing publicity was double-edged. More exposure meant more people reached, but also more scrutiny, more criticism from those who believed family meant unlimited sacrifice. The catering team began cleanup and we gathered our things. In the lobby, Aunt Helen and Uncle Richard waited by the doors. We won't intrude, Helen said quickly. Just wanted to leave this. She handed me an envelope, a check for $10,000 made out to the foundation. The memo line read, repaying what we stole in every sense. This doesn't buy forgiveness, Richard added. We know that, but maybe it helps someone else avoid becoming us. They left before we could respond. Grace held the check like it might explode. Do we take it money from people who hurt us to help people like us? We cash it, I decided. Their guilt becomes someone else's freedom. That's justice poetic enough for me. The drive home was quiet, both of us processing the evening's emotional weight. The gala had succeeded beyond projections, but success felt complicated when it grew from pain. Every donation represented someone who understood family could be dangerous. Every volunteer had their own story of love weaponized against them. You know what I realized tonight, Grace said as we pulled into our driveway. We're not just helping people escape. We're changing the conversation about what family means, what love looks like, what children owe parents. Cultural revolution through paperwork and transitional housing. Why not every revolution starts with someone saying, this isn't okay, and others realizing they agree? Inside, we kicked off heels and collapsed on the couch, still in our gala finery, but no longer performing strength. The house felt like sanctuary after hours of public vulnerability. Mom wrote again. Grace mentioned pulling an envelope from her clutch. Gave it to Jennifer to give to me. I haven't opened it. Do you want to? Part of me always wants to. The part that remembers bedtime stories before she calculated my worth. Dr. Kim says that's normal, grieving the parent we needed while acknowledging the parent we had. I have a box full of Dad's letters. Sometimes I hold them and try to feel something other than tired. Maybe that's okay. Maybe tired is what happens when anger burns out but forgiveness hasn't ignited. Just neutral existence in the same universe. My phone buzzed with texts from Foundation kids who'd watched the live stream. Thank you for showing success after survival. Thank you for proving escape is possible. Thank you for caring when our families wouldn't. Look what we built, I told Grace, showing her the messages. From 2 girls eating ramen in the dark to this. Mom and Dad gave us trauma, but we made it into transformation. For us and for them, she agreed, referring to every young person who'd see our story and realize their own worth wasn't negotiable. Tomorrow would bring more applications, more desperate families using love as leverage, more young adults choosing themselves over manipulation. But tonight we'd raised money and awareness and hope. We'd faced relatives who'd participated in our pain and didn't let it break our progress. The foundation wasn't just our recovery project anymore, it was our legacy. Every person we helped escape wrote a new ending to stories that began like ours. Every dollar raised proved that chosen family could be more generous than blood. Every event like tonight's declared that survival was just the beginning. Thriving was the goal. Next year's gala, Grace asked, already planning. Bigger venue, more survivors speaking, maybe a scholarship announcement. The Winters Sisters Scholarship for Ungrateful Children. I suggested with dark humor. For students whose families believe education is selfishness unless it pays dividends. Perfect. We'll make independence achievable for kids who've been told it's betrayal. We sat in comfortable silence, 2 sisters who'd rebuilt themselves and now built futures for others. The foundation was our phoenix rising from ashes of conditional love to offer unconditional support. Every success story healed us a little more. Every escaped kid proved that cycles could break. Our parents served their sentences in federal prison, but we served ours in boardrooms and benefit galas, turning our imprisonment in trauma into keys for others' escape. It was exhausting, triggering necessary work, and we wouldn't stop until family financial abuse was recognized, addressed, and prevented. The Winters Sisters Foundation stood on ground fertilized by pain, but blooming with possibility. Tonight's gala was just the beginning. There were too many kids sleeping in cars to escape emotional invoices, too many young adults choosing homelessness over home abuse, too many families where love meant debt. But there were also 2 sisters who'd survived, thrived, and decided that their happy ending included making sure others got theirs too. And that foundation built on truth boundaries and the radical notion that children don't owe parents for being born would outlast any prison sentence. The phoenix had risen. Now it was teaching others to fly.